And we need to make sure we mute this so we don't get that feedback again. Yep. And we need to make sure that. So now I'll go back to Zoom. That 0, 0. I guess I just straight down to YouTube. Well, I don't know. We can at least see if somebody's got a question or something, I guess, right?
Yeah, saves us looking at our computers.
Right.
Because we know what we look like here.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Board members to show up there.
That's what the state has told us.
Yep. I'll bring up his file now. Okay.
Good to see you, Cliff. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Doing anything
All
good?
right, there's your 4 files.
Thank you.
I haven't been up by your house to see what you're doing.
I just got no energy to do it.
I guess I do have to have my most better.
Strength, no upper body strength, leg strength.
Well, if you need help with it, let me know.
Probably the top of the garage down. I work for 10, 15 minutes. I got to rest. My son-in-law was coming over, it was pretty good. Since the pandemic, I haven't seen any company in.
Yeah, I know that feeling. My son just stopped in here today. Lunch.
First time he's ever done that. I don't know how to react.
Stay.
I think it was too.
Yeah.
Here's someone sitting this one.
Do you have those copies?
Yeah, I'm gonna hold them till we get started, or whenever you're ready to start. Okay.
Over here.
Okay.
I do anyways.
I'm so honored that stuff come here. You would have to go on.
Oh, it's bad.
I know. Wood. Still above ground chickens.
Oh, where's the one I want? Okay. Oh, did I just shut him off? Hold on.
I got tanks full of water down there. And just gotta take the 3 hoses down. We're short one. I don't know where it went.
I don't know if I brought one from the house or not. I got 2 at the house, so.
So all the ones I got down there now are got 100 and the rest 50. And I went and got the brass ends.
Yep.
Set that all up. Of course, I don't know if you knew, but your mother backed right into this girl last night.
How did you do that?
I don't know. What an ass.
Oh, my bad.
She didn't just go that far. I didn't say anything. She beat herself up all night.
But on this warrant for the town, is that what we paid the water company? 12,000 something? That makes sense.
It was whatever the full amount was that they owed.
Is it on the warrant tonight?
It should be. It was supposed to be. If it isn't, I'll make sure I'll hand carry it over tomorrow.
Or is the warrants for the town? Already been the town, this problem is after. Like, you have the warrants?
Yep, he has them. Where is Word? I'm looking for Word down here. It doesn't show. Maybe I closed them. Who knows?
Yeah, I think you closed the Word.
Yeah. I did.
And if somebody could email back tomorrow, they could email me.
No.
Those questions, I'll close the public hearing. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Begin with the pledge. Should be hanging up there. Control it, stick it right up there in the post. I'll hold up for whatever reason for now. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lord, we ask for thy guidance this night, that as we deliberate for the town, that we might have the best interests of the citizens thereof. We ask for thy guidance that all will be done accordingly. Do this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Excuse me.
Okay, first thing then is approve the minutes of May 20th.
So moved.
Second. Move and second to approve the minutes of May 20th. Any discussion? There was some minor corrections, grammatical errors and stuff, but I sent those in, so they'd be done. Any questions? Okay. All in favor then? June 3rd.
Second.
I move second. Anything happen there? Any discussion on, any other corrections that you saw? Everybody good?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor then? Okay.
Get it back.
Meeting board reports. I think we had that going on this week. We had NMDC, I got another.
We don't have an extra packet, sorry to interrupt. Todd didn't get his, so it's gonna be hard to keep follow along. You got extra stuff there, bud, or just get one of everything?
What do you need?
He needs a whole packet.
Yeah, probably somewhere in here on here's the manager's notes.
You can have them in a morning.
Okay.
Or you want to look at the minutes from last time too, or you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have the ones that need our signatures. These are the original.
Warrants you mean?
Afterwards, we can sign them after we're all done. License. And so. Any board reports? Is there any from anybody?
Went to the water meeting I just finished up. They're just working on I guess that's a pump house or whatever up on Westgate. They're redoing painting inside, redoing the pumps. There's something about 2 valve banks that are cocked sideways, so they have to vacuum, dig them up to replace. And they're just patching up odds and ends. On the long road, there's a fire hydrant that they're working on. And I think that was about it.
As far as the NMDC board, we had our annual meeting. We had to wait quite a while to get a quorum. We did because of this coronavirus and stuff. But anyway, we're having another meeting at the end of the month, another landfill meeting Friday.
Did you see the budget, Tom? Want to look at that?
Okay, manager report.
Okay, we're gonna go over it in a little bit.
Which one you want?
The question is, do you want me to read through it all?
No, just highlight.
Due to what's probably going to be a very long meeting, I kind of shortened up the manager's notes to give in the meeting, but they've been sent out to everybody and they will be posted. Due to the time required to complete the fiscal year 21 budget process and prepare to the town meeting, there was no update being presented of everything that's going on. And really doing that in the fact of, I expect this is going to be a lot longer meeting, and there's really nothing other than working on the fiscal year 21 budget and going forward with getting ready for whatever way we're going to have the town meeting.
Thank you.
From public comments? It's not here on the agenda, but we need to approve the liquor license. Anybody want to make a motion on that?
Motion to approve the liquor, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the liquor license. Any discussions? Seeing none, all in favor then? Okay, old business, fiscal year 21 budget proposal. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay. Want to have somebody pass these out. I want to start with a little piece of information. Being the new kid on the block, some of you have heard this, but quite often when you're the new kid on the block, pieces of what you say gets taken out of place and moves on town. So this is kind of the fact that I've inherited a budget process, and I want to be sure that everybody knows and understands where I'm coming from. First and foremost, I'll state a simple fact to help you understand how seriously I take being here as your new town manager. I've had a few people question me on that, so I thought it'd be there. In simple terms, I've been here 4 weeks and 3 days, which translates into 184 hours of 40 hours a week work time. I'm not asking for anything special. I'm just telling you how I work. I've worked every day, including weekends and holidays, at an average of slightly over 13 hours a day during those 30 days for a total of 390 hours. A bit of quick math will translate into 206 additional hours in the month, which equates to another 5+ weeks time frame in that 1 month. I'm saying that so people understand that I didn't just come up here for a job. I came here for a reason, and I care about Limestone as much as the people of Limestone does. So when you see me there, that's what I do. Feel free to stop at any time. Hopefully that provides insight into we have a lot to do for just about everything I have been working on should have been done before I was even hired. So if people want to know why I'm working, all that we're doing tonight should have been done by April. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's the reality. No time to blame anyone for right now. Keeping the ship afloat in the stormy seas is more important. As for who to blame, well, it goes back far more than a few years and second guessing who and why decisions were made. It's not going to keep us from sinking. I know from my history of being things, I've been on a board of selectmen for 6 years. I've been a town manager. I've worked in the private sector. And one thing I can tell you, there's always somebody that's looking for blame. As we go through the budget tonight, you're going to realize there's no time for blame. It's time to draw the line in the sand and figure out how we're going to get going again, get to calmer waters. Second, the problem with taxes we are facing, and yes, it is a serious, but understanding the cause is more important. We've held down taxes every year by utilizing funds from the reserve. The well is now dry, and had we slowly raised taxes over those years, this would not seem to be such a big spike. Plus, of course, you would still have money in the reserve. Limestone is not the first town to find out cutting taxes by utilizing the reserve is a losing proposition. Actually, there's a county which had a bit of the same problem, and no, it's not the county. And sometimes one may find that even the states in Washington have made such errors of thinking they could bail themselves out by using money in the bank. It usually comes back to haunt you. So with a lot of issues on the table and many different issues to resolve, I encourage all to respect the highest degree for the board, the budget committee, education employees, and most importantly, the public, for only getting together do we even have a chance of succeeding. And I'm saying that not because it's a nice piece of words. I'm saying that because that's why I'm here. I'm here to help, and I can only help if everybody works together. Buries the hatchets, buries everything else, because we're in a very awkward situation, combined with, by the way, we've handled our budgets in recent years, and compounded with everything that's going on now with COVID-19, how it's shutting down the economy of the future, what's going to happen in November. I don't see any of this clearing up and getting back to what was the norm prior to January, where the economy was booming. And that's not a political statement for pro or con. That's just the reality facts that it's quite evident that education, state of Maine education, which gets a lot of money from casinos, has been shut down for a quarter of the year or more by the time it's done, which means the casinos isn't going to be giving anybody money. So even if we survive the stormy seas to the town meeting, there's still many more issues to address in the upcoming months to set a new foundation for the future. And what I'll be doing is, I fully realize the Board of Selectmen didn't get the budget done. I fully realize the Budget Committee didn't get the time they felt they ought to have. The reality is, we have to take a budget forward. And I think when you see the numbers tonight, you'll understand where I'm coming from in the budget. So if you'll bear with me, I will whip through a little bit here, and you'll see after that page, and I wrote that out solely so anybody wants to question what I do. Find the right one here. Okay, down here. This is to break it down quite easily to show you where we stand. If you look at the second page, this is the big hit. This is the one education's been funding at $250,000 a year just so the taxes wouldn't go up, because the school budget's actually not up that much. The fact that they don't have $250,000 or more every year to keep it up just has compounded the problem. So if you look at it in fiscal year 2020, the town was required to raise $537,372. For anybody that doesn't understand what required is, the state mandates you raise that amount of money. Then depending on the community, you can spend more if you so choose. And in that case, they raised $432,128 for a total of $969,500. So if you look right there, the 250 in reserve, that would have been in taxes otherwise. But that came from an account to offset taxes for a number of years. So that dropped us down to 719,000 last year that you raised in taxes instead of the 969,500. This year, there's 521,066 required by the state, which is actually down 16,000. But the town's addition is 566,000, which is up to 134 more for a 31% increase, which totals out to these numbers here, which comes to a 12.2 increase. But as you can see, since the first time the budget went out and everything, the school has gone back into the reserve account and pulled another $150,000 out, leaving it 937 for a 30.3% increase in what they want in taxes. I'm not able to tell you whether you should vote for it or against it. All I can tell you is historically, no town has ever shut down the school budget, no matter how many times they've gone to vote. Madawaska is an example up in this area. And every time we have an election, guess who pays for it? Not the school, the town. So that's something that people have got to decide, and the budget committee and the board has got to decide what they want to support. I'm just bringing you the information. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Okay. The next one is the ambulance and first responders. $25,350 last year, $218,600 this year. 2 or 3 years ago, if you'd have done, this is failing all over the country, so this is not rare. If all the communities would have got together and said, what can we do? In Washington County, there's 14 towns when this happened to them that merged together into a quasi-municipal operation, which basically as a municipal operation, they try to hold the prices down and send the service. Because it's gone by a couple of years and everybody's invested, we're seeing this price goes up because our current source is there. Not a whole lot you can do right now, much as you would like to. That's what they want for a check. We get an invoice, we pay it. 50% of that will come from Loring. That's like waiting for the money from the state, I think, but it's coming from Loring. And you have to be concerned about the future there, but that's out of our category right now. So all comes in total, when you add that together, the ambulance is up 762%. Well, it's not a whole lot of money in terms of anything. It's $193,000. But when you're talking about brand new tax money, that's a lot of money. When you add them together, you come up with a 55% increase in taxes just from those two sources. So I can tell you from my past history, we'd go to town meeting and we would slash the municipal budget because that's the only thing we could slash. And we'll go down through that. If you remember last month, we started out, 2 weeks ago, we started out talking about the easy stuff. So tonight I'll talk about the hard stuff, because when I was here 2 weeks ago, everybody was concerned why I didn't put raises in until we got to the end of the night and saw what the tax was going to increase. So I want to be straightforward on this. We're in a bind. And whether you vote for it or against it, it's not up to me, but mine is to go. So last week we started with those parts and explains it. There is no answer right now other than saying we don't want ambulance service, or we're going to fight with the school that you can cut that money. I think the fact that the superintendent even added the 150,000 of his little pot of gold, as the guy's saying, but starting the day after the town meeting, we best be starting to do a lot of planning and not waiting for next January, February, March to figure out how we're going to get this town to go forward. I don't see more money as in the list. So coming down through there,
Excuse me, the other point to consider is with that 150,000 they're taking
Are we
out
still on the
this
air?
year, it means next year, that's on the taxes, unless they take another 100,000, because that's not all they have left in the
How
reserve.
much is left then?
It's got 100,000.
Right now, there's 275, what we're told. So if you take 150 out of it, that leaves 125. That's all they have left.
and it's, it's done, it's over, with nothing we can do about it other than figure out how we're going to make out of it. So anyway, I've broken these down into categories with explanations, simple explanations, figuring you might ask questions. But county tax is just an invoice, we pay the bill. It's no different than you get your taxes on your home. We don't like it, but they send the bill, we pay it or pay interest on it. So you can see that's up 11.4%. And we have, I'm sure they had a budget committee and a budget committee meeting, and everybody that we represented, all the towns voted to raise it up, and that's it. It's 11.4%. Solid waste, you're fortunate you're in something like I'm talking about with the ambulance service that works better, because that's a pretty decent price to get rid of all your trash in this day and age compared to trying to run your own private transfer station. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions on those, but to move down to the tough subjects, is there anybody got a question on those two for me? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but insurance, we've got nothing for any increases, which is probably because everybody's home working on the computer, so forth. But I do have some concern whether it's going to go up or go down when it includes such things as workers' compensation. Well, if nobody's working, there can't be too many injuries, so maybe there'll be a drop in it. My job is to figure out all the pros and cons, and sometimes they sound dumb, but if insurance goes up, it's not like it can't go up in December and we go over budget. Debt retirement, we bought something, we pay a bill, that's just the standard way. You can see it's the same amount of money. Actually, it will be a few pennies less because we made a payment last month, but we didn't get it yet to say how many pennies that's going to be. But I felt every year that they've been doing this, it's always that little bit less. So with that, you've got that. That's for a payloader and a backhoe, which puts them in pretty good shape for those. The library, and I had to apologize to the librarian because I made a statement last week when I was asked, where can we cut? Technically, the library and recreation are not a requirement of the town to place, where other departments are a requirement, whether you contract them out or not. I'm certainly not recommending that, but the question was asked, what can be there? You don't have to do that. I don't think the people would ever want to do that because neither one of them is going to drop the mill rate enough that it's going to make them happy. So I don't see that as at risk. Are there ways in all these departments to clarify that we've got to start working, we get past town meeting to be sure we're getting everything we can for the money? Yes. But in 30 days, I haven't been able to address all of those things yet. Economic and community development is $5,000. It was asked for $10,000 and it's been up and down and up and down. If you read my note, I think one of the things that Leesburg, where I've lived, Limestone needs to have is you can't just count on Loring to be your economic development tool. You've got to have something somewhat local. There is a group of people who are very concerned, but I truly believe it has to be more from, as much from within the board. And I was called an expert. I'm not an expert in anything. I've just been around a long time. And I think that the $5,000 is sufficient for what they need. If I'm a partner in that department, which by definition, I would think I am. I don't, the board might say they don't want me doing it, but I think it's a very critical thing, particularly with the fact that Loring is only really addressing the big golden goose, and location isn't favorable for us on that. So I think there's a lot of little stuff that we could do, and $5,000 is just to provide something to show good faith to the people that are working on this. I've met with some of them. I just think it's something. I've done it both places I've worked. I did it as a selectman because we used to have what was called liaison positions, where each selectman was a liaison with a different part they might have something to do with. And it makes for a better work environment, and it makes it better to explain the budget, even if you add a person to the budget committee for it. So as you can see in that, that's $5,000 up, but it's $5,000 less than it was 2 years ago. I think that showing some faith right now in economic development in the group that's there is probably a good idea, but that's when you can decide what you want to do with. Municipal Operations Reserve, that one took me a little while to figure out because you do it a little different here, that you set aside amounts of money for each individual department versus a lump sum of money. And I understand all the battles. Well, it was supposed to be something to fix the fire department, and the public works department used it and so forth. But that is down by need. It's down $37,000. I could tell you, cut the other $46,000, but based on the way it's been used, some of that probably should be in the department's operation budget, not, it's one thing if it's a special need, but it's kind of a little police one. So I think leaving that in there, if at all possible, is valid, and you'll see why later on. So public safety, that pretty much speaks for itself in the terms that it's streetlights and it's the fire hydrants. That's where I'm going to be recommending that we put the ambulance service. Because we don't own the ambulance service, we simply pay a bill and they serve us. So to me, it falls into that category instead of where it was. And I think that's a better place for it. Public safety, streetlights, hydrants. We do have a problem. We haven't been able to analyze yet why we're not seeing the drop in our streetlights with the new lighting system in. And I will be fair with you, I haven't had a chance to break it down in detail. But one of the things I found out is all kinds of lights on the streetlights instead of it just being the 117 streetlights. So we got to go in and break the budget down and pull out just those ends. But some people seem to believe we should already be seeing a discount. I don't know exactly yet how far back it goes, but we'll find that out and take care of that. So I've left that at the same amount. Social services is where you look at it, and social services is basically a bunch of charitable organizations and local service stuff. If you would have left everything in there with the ambulance and general assistance, it would have been up 190. It would have been up the total of that amount of money right there, $234,000. By taking out general assistance, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with general assistance, we are only an agent for the state. We have no control over how much money is spent. Whereas an agent of the state, we pay, we have somebody that says it goes through a file of information, and they're either eligible to receive it or they're not eligible to receive it. If they're eligible to receive it, we're required to give them the money, but we get 70% back from the state. So we're only contributing 30%. So technically you could make that 0 or 30%, or wonder how much general assistance. Typically we use an average of what it's been in there, and hopefully we'll wind up with not losing 30% in too many numbers. So I would pull that out of there. because those are things that there's probably an account they ought to be in, and I'll explain later why I'm doing that. It goes down to the general assistance, how that works. I have one that's called unclassified, and it's really kind of like social services, and that there's a variety of things in there. I'm not sure if unclassified really, that's what it is, but there's a number of things in there. I believe Christmas lights and a variety of things are in there. There are other titles that could go under, and there's in your packets that you have had in the past, there's listing of all those things. And it comes down through here to what I call the municipal operations. This is where on the town hall floor, we tentatively see the people cut. How much time you want to spend on the budget tonight is based on how much time you really want to spend, because it's the same budget you passed last year. And I presume you all went through that budget very closely and come up with a number. And I can tell you right now that there's a lot of those areas that are the reasons we're not getting everything done we should be. But I've cut back everything that's there. I've talked to the employees because of the way the process is historically done here. It starts off with what I call the Christmas wish book, and people have expectations, and then Santa Claus doesn't deliver them. So what it comes down to is this simple part right here, is we're talking about 1/2 of 1%. So yeah, you can cut $5,500 out, and that's not gonna make a penny on the mill rate. That's really kind of the overlook for what's in there for numbers. And as I said, what I'm looking for is whether or not we, who have been trusted by the town to provide the best budgets and best leadership we can, whether we're going into a town meeting and do a big battle over stuff that's, when all is said and done, unless somebody's going to say they want to cut the budget by cutting the ambulance service or cut the budget by cutting the school, the numbers are not there. I will say that I wished I could tell you more, but honestly, in 30 days, following your budget has been a magical situation. So with that is, if you've got any questions on where it goes, I do have a position here that talks about all the stuff that's on that page. So if you've got questions, I can set. Can't see too well over the side of my head, I guess. That goes in there. Part of the reason for the increase is health insurance went up. We pay on average 80% of the policy. The employees pick up 20%. So we as a town are eating that, and they are, as the employees are losing that. That's what triggered the last meeting to talk about when we were coming from the easy side down. Well, maybe we ought to be looking at least offsetting that. Well, now that we've looked at the hard numbers, I guess I would want the board and the budget committee to tell me they want to offset that by, if nothing else, just the amount that's in there. So that's all the data that's on your sheet. Now, bear with me. This is not typically how I do it. This is the whole budget proposal. This is the sheet that you've had for some time that lists all the information that Trio puts out. It's the most ungodly thing to work with. This process here is basically downloading Trio into a format that's a little more understandable. And the difference with this compared to other towns is, anybody have one of those Alexa things at home that you say, what's the temperature out, and or so forth? You know what, does everybody know what I'm referring to? Okay. Trio is Alexa. She can answer any financial data that you want to know if Trio's been programmed to print that out. The way we've been doing the budget all these years, I'm not quite sure how you must have spent a lot of hours getting through it, because all of the stuff that's talked about in that line, there's what's called a third tier. Your first tier is being 10 administration, 20 public works, 30. The next tier is insurance, payroll, office. The third tier is all the positions, all the lines that are underneath that load everything that's happened all year long in that department. Unfortunately, our trio program has never been asked to provide that. So I've got a friend who's going to help train us on how to get that loaded in there so that we can have that. Because that will make everybody's job a heck of a lot easier doing the budget. Because right now, every time we try to do something, we got to go in and say, well, payroll, we got to go over here. Insurance, we got to go, that'll all come right out just the same way you're looking at it now. So all the data that you got is adjustments to the latest trio sheet where we've gone down through everything in there, and it breaks down. It's a long process. And if there's any of them you want to talk about after I shut up, feel free to ask for them. But I just want to do the one outburst. So all this stuff has been worked on every day since I've been here. A good part of it has been trying to understand why everything isn't winding up in the departments it's supposed to be. And we've called it a mistake by Trio, but it's really a mistake on how we use Trio because we never asked Trio to give us that information. So when we move a line, it doesn't always move the line both ways because in the upgrades of Trio, it was never asked for. And I'm not talking about this year, last year, or the year before, going back quite some time. So all of this stuff comes down through right to the bottom, down through the whole thing, right down to where we are, coming down, and I can go back to these, but I just want to show you how much effort we've put into getting this down, right down to the revenue, and then you back up a little bit here, and this line here will give you all your revenues that are down below, so you got them a little closer, and then up here, it talks about total from school from taxes, 51.2%. Total municipal budget increase, 9.5% when you include everything that's in there other than just the departments you have to respond. Total expenses from taxes is up 21.2%. You come down through, you put your revenue in there, it gets stuck it down through to where right now we're setting at roughly $385,000 an increase, pending the fact that we don't really know from the state whether we're going to get some of that income. So anybody want to take a guess what kind of mill rate you're talking about? It's large. It's very large. And I would be telling you a fib if I sat here and said there's any way that you can cut it out of this budget. It's not increased spending. It's increased, the ambulance is, yes, increased spending, but it's not increased spending. It's the way we've done our business for a number of years, and now it's time to pay the piper. What comes from that is tonight, you folks have got to decide that you're going to send the budget forward. Whether you change it here tonight or not, you're going to send it forward in order for us to have a meeting in July. We're on the drop deadline. You might put a budget.
What's the law that states that?
What's that?
What's the law that states that?
I wish it wasn't on the air. The person in charge of the emergency documentation out of Augusta, who has waived it so it can even be in July. And I think we're going to go through that later on. But it's a case of where, God, I don't want to say Madam Governor, but it's a case of where the meeting was supposed to be last week in June 10th, I think is the date. That's when this town meeting was supposed to be held, or the election was held. Maybe the 11th would be that.
Yep.
That's when we started last year. That's when the meeting was supposed to be had. I got here May 18th. And I've been working as much as I can to even try to understand the budget. The one thing I didn't know when I said I think Limestone's where I want to go is I wasn't prepared. Everything I was prepared for, but I was not prepared for that big hit for the school and the ambulance, which makes my job a whole lot more difficult. But really, my job is to provide you information. And my view on this is we've got to go to a meeting, and people are not going to be unhappy if for no other reason they're tired of being pent up in the house. I fully understand that. I did my 14 days. But there's an issue of what you're going to do. And also I'm the bearer of the news. I'm open for any questions, but if you don't go with some united, it doesn't mean that everybody's got to vote, but if you don't go with some united point towards passing this budget, where are they going to cut it on the town hall floor? I'm open to, I can't come up with a place that they can cut that amount of money out of the budget.
You're saying we can't cut the school.
I'm saying historically we'd be the
We were
first.
misinformed from day one.
Okay.
We can't cut the school.
No, I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying nowhere in the state of Maine has it ever successfully passed after a number of meetings.
But we can be the first.
Well,
I think it's all depends how you sell it. So you started out at 600,000. Last year you went up to 9. Now you're at almost $1.1 million.
yeah, but that's,
You look at the increase, okay, we don't want to, this is my sell to this deal. You don't want to give a budget, and none of us, we can give advance to anybody as far as pay, okay? But I look at the numbers from last year to this year, it's $168,000 difference.
Yep.
27,000 is for the instruction for the teachers by law, you have to. 57 is for special, so you do that. The 73,407 is obviously raises in the administration. So if I can't give raises to people in this town, why are we allowing people up here to get raises when they've only worked for us for 2 years? I have a problem with that. So yes, you can cut this.
oh, I agree.
There's 73,000 right there. You cut that, you got 4 mills if you cut that. If you don't, you're going up 7. Anybody in this room afford to pay 7 more mills? I could close up and go to Presque Isle and live there for 24.
Yep.
So what's the selling point of coming to Limestone?
I agree completely.
A farmer can't afford it. How's he gonna rent his land tomorrow? He's gonna rent his land. I can go to Caribou, get land cheaper. Farmers took a 17% cut. This is what the board, as far as the school board and them guys gotta understand, these farmers don't have any money. They're our cash cow. They're the one, they don't have the money to supply this. So this should not, you say the education's not a place to cut. I've been in business 23 years and I look at this thing and that is the first place I would cut.
Let me clarify exactly what I'm saying, okay? Historically, nobody in the state of Maine, and many of them have done it, have had a budget meeting, have had a town meeting, had a town meeting, had a town meeting. And in some of those cases, it wound up, they spent more than if they'd have passed it the first time. So Limestone might be the one that statistically makes that happen.
But you have to.
Ask it.
Financially, you
That's-
can't do it.
All leave.
That's-
What's the sense?
No, I'm only the messenger. I'm laying
Who's
out.
gonna rent your land, Tom? I mean, if you gotta go up that much for land rent because of taxes, nobody can afford to rent.
I'm not asking you
You can't
anything
afford to retire and
that-
pay your taxes and keep paying
I
for
can't
nothing.
afford to do anything,
Right,
so I gotta retire.
right. But I mean, these guys took a 17% cut. It's like, you don't have a McCain's downtown. We have farmers. And unfortunately, they're not here because they can't vote in this town because they don't live here, like the Griffiths and the Levitts and the Edgecombe. These people, you have to understand, these people are trying to make a living. So you can't just say, well, we're going to pass this. Absolutely not.
I'm not saying you have to pass it. You put it out there with a message that you want to put it out there with. My job is to provide you all the options that are out there. No matter how you cut it, there's going to be that battle. There always is.
If you cut it
If
$73,000.
there's enough people that don't want to cut, then you cut it. But what happens when you cut it?
Well, it's got to come from somewhere else, but I'll tell you, if tomorrow, next year, if I made $10,000, I won't die. I'll see you again the year after and I'll live. You just can live amongst your needs.
I'm very comfortable with whatever you do. I'm only here to lay out what happens because truthfully, we should have never have been funding the tax bill because if you take the tax bills, we're about right where we would have been by using up that $250,000 every year. Because what we're trying to do now is we're trying to make it all up.
But 15 years ago, if you would have lived amongst your needs, so to speak, you wouldn't have this problem today. You'd have money in the bank. You wouldn't have stuff you can't afford. You're living a lifestyle that you cannot
Everybody's
afford.
gonna use the reserve. Everybody's gonna use the reserve.
Well, you don't have to. I mean, it's not, what's wrong with having money in the bank?
Leave it
Well,
alone.
all I'm trying to do is, in the month that I've been here, this all happened before I got here, is trying to analyze what your options are. There's options out there that you've got to look at and so forth. But that's the budget. And the only thing I'm telling you is historically, beating the school has not been good. Limestone might be the one that does it. I don't know, but it would be wrong for me not to lay that on the table. You and I have had the discussions.
I'm all for the school.
I agree with that, but the way you were talking about it, is we couldn't cut that budget.
Sure you can.
And
Well, I think the way he expressed it, maybe some might have interpreted it that way, but what he was saying is,
Notoriously, that they don't let you.
Yeah,
well, like Madawaska, you know, how many times did they have to come back? Fort Kent, last couple of years, they've had to do it 5 times at Fort Kent.
Well, Pascal did it also.
Yeah, that's true, that's true.
Unbelievable.
it's,
But when you're sold something at a
But
certain number
let me
and
tell you
you buy it, it's not there.
we wouldn't be in
Doubled
this
up.
position if we weren't then aligned.
Right.
So
So
we'd be still.
the sheet that I just handed out,
Would have gone up.
the sheet I just handed out, I had some calls today about the breakdown and so forth. Nobody really knew what they were. So what I did is I put it all together here, and it's just showing last year's to this year's. It shows the increased areas, and the reason for it I put over on the right-hand side. Other than that, the information is the same as what we presented in the budget, but just so you can see where it's happening, because the questions were coming in, who's getting the raises? Well, the teachers, because of state mandate, have to have a raise in order to get up to that certain level that's needed for the state now. So some of us have to have that.
So one student takes 57,000.
especially,
When you're talking about teachers and the mandates of those salaries, that salary is based on the minimum wage of a first-year graduating teacher. Now, what's negotiable in these teachers' contracts is the person with 3 years service, 5 years service, 10 years service. And when the bottom people get raised, person with 20 years service thinks they ought to get a percentage. If they went up 6%, they ought to go up 6%. And that's the problem with some of this teacher's salary that he's talking about. If we had 5 new teachers in here, that extra $3,000 that they're making a year is going to kill this budget. It's that 3,000 that turned into 10,000 on the 20-year teacher that's killing them. That's negotiable.
Yeah, that's where I was leading to, so thank you. The second item that went up was the special education need. And he briefed us at the last meeting that they had a new student come in, so the additional cost, transportation and all this stuff, that's why that's up.
That seems substantial for one student, 50-some thousand.
It is, but special ed is very expensive. All the years that I've worked in the school, that's always the contention because we have to pay so much for it.
Huh.
So anyway, looking down through, you can see where the changes are and so forth. So I was checking to see if Mr. Dobbins was going to be here tonight to answer any of these questions, but I haven't got a response. So this is what I could put together for you and the information I gained. And some of this was taken out of last year's report. So I know those numbers are good because that's what we voted on. And then this year is what he proposed. So anyway, working down through and just to make sure everything worked out down to the very bottom, I just put stuff in there so I can see that the totals do agree. So that's why you see the numbers down at the bottom agreeing with the numbers up above. That's just my way of double checking to make sure that I've accounted for everything. So,
Well, before the evening's over, I'm gonna make the motion that we send, as a committee, send this back to the school committee.
it's fine.
And that's because it's gonna happen. If we don't do it, the town's gonna do it at the town meeting. And they may do it anyway. But I think that would solve a lot of discussion on this tonight, that it would be, at least my vote would be to send it back to the school committee. I didn't like the arrogance of the superintendent the other night. You know, I'm God and the state of Maine is God. Well, okay, we're still paying the bill.
We're the devil and we're sending it back.
And we have that right, even as a board, as a committee, either one of us. And that's why in the town report, it's got the 3 entries. Because if they don't agree with it, they can still put it in and let the town decide.
If we're forced to take the school, then a lot of departments are going to be canceled in the town line.
Well, if we have to do that, which I don't see that happening.
Well,
Because we need
they've
them
got to
in the
take the
town.
school back.
That's what I'm saying. So, anyway,
And so you don't read me wrong. I've been on that side of the bench fighting the school since 1986. It's got a budget process that all the schools use, and I'm pretty good with working through the computer system. And I'll tell you, it's the hardest thing to find out where the money goes in the school budget.
Sure is.
And so anyway, because I've inherited this, I'm sorry if you mean that you have to vote for the school end. The issue I'm trying to talk about is how do we get to the meeting? And that's up to the board and you people to decide where you want to stand and so forth. I only am cautioning you on the fact that historically I've seen towns get mad and wipe out more of the municipal services. And if I'm only going by, that's why I brought the numbers down to where they were, as I didn't feel that I could come back and say, you were wrong last year, you need to cut more services because the school's taking more money. So
We're spending money like the Air Force is still out here. Not out there.
So anyway, why I'm anxious to get it done, whichever way it is we've got a long road ahead of us. I'm recommending to the board that we change the way we do our budget process a little bit. And it's, if you don't mind me going off on it before you get into the real financial stuff, there's a way to tie Trio into Excel, into Microsoft Word, and into PowerPoint, where you can update the budget every month, 12 months out. So even in December, it's 12 months out. So you've got all the data. It's updated monthly with everything that you know. So I've done this PowerPoint presentation, and no matter what you come up with tonight, we're going to have to put as much news out to the public as we can, because you'll talk later on when you talk about how we have a meeting, you'll understand some of the issues. And what this does is it goes down through. Historically, what the problem is budget committees, selectmen, and townspeople look at the budget as July 1st to June 30th. You have some data from the previous years, which actually seldom is correct because the numbers haven't been adjusted for the June, July thing. So what you do is you work off of 3 months of solid history, and you can project out as far as you want. The computer can do that, and you can adjust it every time something happens. And it's a process. And this thing will go on when it's full of the right data. Here's a reality I think you all agree to. Anybody disagree with this one? Can you read it? It's not a question of wants and needs. It's a question of money. The answer, oops, I'm sorry. The answer is unfortunately simple. There's no more money. I mean, if there's money out there, feel free to tell me where it is, because I'd like to go get it, but I don't see where there's any more money for this side of some new construction, new business, new taxpayers coming in. You're right. We've taken the town to the position it's in. This goes down through, and I'll go through it fairly quickly. It explains the budget process so people can read on it. Oops. And it gets into defining it right down through the budget process, because a lot of people out there don't really understand it. I mean, most of us are working with it all the time. We sometimes don't feel we understand it. But when it goes down into it, it talks about the budget process and getting it done, and explains who the Board of Selectmen are and who the Budget Committee is. And this part here is probably the most important one to the public. And it goes down to explaining the process. And it really gets down to the presentation of expenses, revenue, and taxation in terms of where the money comes from, where the money goes, and how both impact the mill rate. Clarifies how the budget meets the wants and needs of the community. That's really what we should be working on, is that stuff way in advance, not just the numbers. What do we really want the town to be and have? This allows you to do it if you so choose to. The unfortunate part is it does not take away the dislike and the pain of taxation. Because in general, most people want more and pay less. And that's sometimes is what's got us into trouble, and that's why the state controls education and for the most part prevents us from doing it. For some, where it comes into is it breaks down so people can understand where all the money comes from. Because not all of the budget's property tax and personal tax. We get money from, these numbers, by the way, are not Limestone's numbers. I haven't been able to transfer them in yet because this program, I've used it in 2 other cities. Oh, there. It talks about revenue sharing. This town that this was for, this wasn't Limestone, but they got very little in revenue sharing because they were considered wealthy. They were the poorest town in the school district, but they were considered wealthy by the state because they have 2 lakes where the old cottages that local people used to have been torn down and placed with $500,000 homes that are used in the summer. So wealthy in the state is kind of an odd thing, the way they do the school budget. Harrison paid 22% of the budget for 10% of the students in the school district. And most of the tax money came from, that was a business. So you get out through it and it'll have all the numbers loaded going through it. And there's an interesting part of it that it will break down. It goes in with this, explaining where things are, going down through it. Based on some level of numbers tonight, I'll start updating this so we can share it with the public. And it goes down through municipal operations, down through, oh, there's our new front end, some things that got done in it when I sat at home at night. The administration budget. And there's an interesting factor that a lot of people think of is they look at the budget and say, look what that's costing me. Because they look at it as a percentage of taxation. There's Public Works. That's not yours, by the way. That's when they got where I was before. And it talks about where the money went so people know. People in general, if they can afford it, are interested in getting the things that help them. But in Harrison, Public Works was 7.8% of the budget, but it was only 1.1% of your property taxes. Now, people say, why is that be? Because the money we get from the state, from the roads, if we don't spend it on the roads, it has to go back. So in their particular case, a huge percentage of that money was there. If you look at the mill rate, how did it work? We successfully spent more money, bought more things, and kept the tax rate flat for 5 years by doing the things you have to do. Can I do them here? I don't know. It's a case of how seriously we could set and work on everything. And I would like to think I could stay here and do that, but I know there's revolving doors. Both places I went to had them. My desire, because this is kind of like a hobby to me, I'm sorry, but I don't play golf and I'm too old to play other things. So this is a whole process and it goes right through. And the most important part, if you bear with me till I get down through the whole thing, it's long, that's why I don't want to go through the whole thing. But down at the end, it has specific capital plans that go out numbers of years so you know when you've got to buy things. This little sheet right here runs off of the sheet that sets your tax rate. When you put all your numbers in the state paperwork, it comes up with what your mill rate's going to be. This right here, and again, this is not here, but if you look at this, you'll see that the mill rate in 2017 was $10.95. Believe me, the taxes, they collect a lot of tax money because of valuation. The year before that, 2016, it was $11.15. So we actually cut it 20 cents. This chart tells you what it would take if you were sitting here tonight and said, and this was your town, this chart, constantly updated monthly, will tell you how much you have to cut or how much you can add if you decide you want to spend more money. So this one is broken down in 3, 6, 9, and 12% intervals. So for them to cut 3%, they got to cut $184,000 out of the budget. For them, we'd like to do a little bit more roads, but with 3% increase in our taxes give us $184,000. So, well, what's that mean to the taxpayer? Because we get confused over mill rate when we ought to be confused over what's the bottom line we make the check for. Because you can do a revaluation and drop your mill rate or increase your mill rate, but that doesn't change everybody's bottom line on taxes. So it's really that amount of money. So this chart here, on any given month, updated, it will tell you what the increase or decrease in your taxes are going to be. So while you're going through the budget process, that's updated every time we make changes to it. And that allows you to work with a sensibility to it. The town may not choose to do it. It's a successful program. I've been numerous times, people said you ought to get somebody to write that. It's not that difficult to do, but it also means the town manager has to truly look at the numbers every month. And I don't want to say that every town manager doesn't, but that's sometimes what leads to the problem. It'll also tell you when you're using too much reserve and other things that you've got a problem with it. That's my presentation. That's my job I've inherited. And I guess I got to turn it back to here and the board and the committee to see what they'd like to do.
So as it relates to the ambulance, why are we funding LDA's portion of $1,500 within our budget?
Because we have it under revenue.
So why aren't they paying us their
They-
share for the half a year and then we?
They have.
They've already paid us for the.
They pay quarterly, yes.
But ultimately, the contract is with the town of Limestone based on our per capita.
Yep.
We went to Loring to see what they would do, right? You remember that? And they
Yep.
said they'd pay half.
Yep.
But we still have to have it in our budget, even though we're expecting that to come in. What happens if they don't pay it? It's still coming out of our pocket. So we have to budget for it.
So you're hoping for surplus, obviously.
Yeah, and we have it in revenue for the year. So that it cuts the mill rate down because when you deduct revenue,
And it's taken out.
It's a wash.
Yeah.
So.
and hopefully they'll pay it.
Wash, or is it not? Because I've asked this question a couple times and I can't quite
Okay.
get a clear answer on whether we are raising that 101 in the mill rate or.
No, we're not. It's the same with the state money. You know, I can go back to the chart and show you if you want. When you look at the budget, where am I? Right here is the total municipal budget. And here's the total expenses from taxes. And down here is all your varieties of revenue. That includes the 102,000, whatever the exact number is from them. It includes the money. And this is why I use the percentage of what part is taxes and what part is not. Because the road money that we get from the state has to be used. We have to sign a document every year stating with where we spent that money, or we have to send it back to them. So in truth, a lot of the road work we're getting done is paid for. Okay, it's not by us because it's our money that goes to the state. Government doesn't have money. They have our money and so forth. But it's always put in the revenue account to offset taxes.
So where do we see a breakdown of the revenue so that we can understand?
Well, I'm just down to the revenue here, and there's a whole batch of them, but there's a whole listing of them that wasn't broke out particularly this way. If you look in your sheet, you can find it, but there's, boy, I can get in trouble a lot. I ought to shut up. There's not necessarily a real good history of how we've done our numbers. And part of what I'm going to be coming to the board with this all over is some restructuring of things, because there's a lot of things that's been moved back and forth and stuff that, unlike the school that has a standard format that everybody uses, every town uses a different one. And there's some pretty common grounds to keep them in those areas. I'll give you an example. We should have a capital roads account, and we should take the $90,000 that's in the roads, in the Public Works Department, out of there. And people are going to say, well, why would you do that? Because we sometimes want to do roads, we sometimes don't want to do roads. We sometimes do want to do roads, sometimes we don't. So every time the budget goes up and down, by putting it in capital roads, what you'll have, if the board follows me, is you'll have exactly the services you have to pay for and why and what they're gonna cost. Capital roads, you still might decide some years you want to spend more, some years you don't. If you want an opinion from somebody that's been on that side, I would cut the $90,000 out of the roads this year. And I would bond a 5-year note to do roads next year on paid out over 5 years. That would do you more roads. And the reason for that is if anybody's ever worked with the type of contracts and they have to bring the equipment in and take equipment out, that's a big part of their expense. So if you did 5 years worth of roads in 1 year and paid for them over 5 years, you're going to get more for your money.
They tried that. They tried that last year, and they took the bond out because they didn't want to use the interest money, which they could use to put tar down.
No, we didn't have a good plan together.
I was gonna say, I don't think the plan was there.
It was
They
just.
wanted to know what roads and all that. We
It's,
didn't have any of that.
and if this was,
Got a list down.
if this wasn't the budget meeting and this was all over and we were talking about what I would like to do, it would be a little easier presentation because you set up 3 accounts: capital equipment, capital facilities, and capital roads. And you write out a plan over the number of years it takes to do those roads. One of the biggest complaints in most rural towns is, well, you told me 5 years ago they'd do my road. They still haven't done it because there's never been a plan, and whoever gets elected this year decides their brother-in-law needs the road paved. So not saying limestone, you guys might be perfect, but everything I tell you is a real story from somewhere. And when you're talking about a certain amount of miles of road, we've got to stop painting them. There's ways you can fix them and so forth. I don't know how well it works up here because I don't know how many paving contractors come up this far. But if you have your money in advance, you have this issue where they need the truck drivers because they don't keep all their employees employed year round. So when there's a lot of paving going on, he who has the first contract gets the best drivers. So you can usually get a good bid. Well, yeah, but we can't bid to the town meeting in June. Well, in June, the people that are already prepared have already got their contracts in, and they're no longer fighting to see who's going to get the best deal. These are factual numbers. I can show them to you. And there's ways to fix the roads that you can do. If anybody's been on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, we don't have the worst potholes in the world in Maine. But you would leave that part of roads in there because that is what Public Works is supposed to do. They're supposed to keep the roads clear in the winter, sanded and safe, and then they're supposed to fix the potholes and the other things that need to get done. But when you have a budget going up and down, there's a typical when you go up too high, there's a desire to cut it back next year, and it always seems to be lower than. Only talking statistical. So you put a plan together that says, these are the roads, and you set them up in a manner by finding somebody that really knows the roads and would like to take a trip out and do the mileage of the roads and get the miles down and which roads need to be done. And you can put the program and it will work if they want. Facilities, equipment, the same thing. It's a matter of when do you do it? Oops. I'd be glad to show this stuff. I'd be glad to do it public hearing. I'd be glad to do it anyway. It's a little complex right now trying to put something together, but everything that's in here is the numbers that's in there. What's amazing is you'll see I've taken the pennies out of this. There's no .06 or .08. They're still in there. They just don't show because the fact is when they all wind out, you're still winding up being plus or minus 2 cents, and it takes up too much space. So you go in here and you do the, typically what's happened in a lot of towns, particularly towns that turn over town managers quite often, is you simply put a percentage on and you raise the amount of money with no justification. Or you lower the amount of money with no justification. When you put that third tier of data in there, you know where every cent's going. Matter of fact, if you want to go 4 tiers and 5 tiers, you can have every vehicle, what it's using for gasoline and so forth. It's all in the computer. It's a matter of utilizing it. And we've got to get somebody to come in and do that, and somebody's going to do it for me. Because that way, when you go to your budget meetings well in advance, you shouldn't be doing it the week before the town meeting. You should be doing it months in advance where you really know, and maybe you can do something significant to cut into this. If the board decides and the town decides they don't want to do any of that, that's fine, but I don't see any future in going back to a continuation of a process that isn't creating the improvements you need to have your hand on everything that's going on all the time. That's my view.
Okay, along with that question of the revenue coming in from Loring, as you recognize, with many of our accounts, any revenue that we get in doesn't automatically go back into that account. It goes into the undesignated fund. Goes in there as a reserve, basically. We don't get to use it. And that's why we keep building some of those, because we have all these money that don't get spent during the year. At the end of the year, it's dumped into that file. So the next year, we're right back taxing again to keep that going. One of the things that I would like to recommend that we look at is with these funds, and I mentioned it at a couple of other meetings, is that we take those reserve, the monies that are left over and have them applied back to that same account. That way, it's not only encouraging people to only spend what they need, because you know how the government is, especially any of us that have been in the services. If you don't spend it, you're not getting it next year. So the way I look at it is, if you don't spend it, you know it's going to be there next year. It reduces your cost. So like the Loring thing, you know, we don't have that as a designated coming into that revenue to offset it, which is an action that we need to take if that's what we want to do with it. Otherwise, it is out of our taxes. Yeah, it's considered revenue, but since it's not designated to go back in there, we have to follow what our rules are as a town, and where does it go? Back to that undesignated reserve. So it's something we need to think about with all our departments. You know, we did that action for the police department, remember years ago, with money that we were getting from Loring? We took that motion and had it put back into there to help offset it. We need to do that same thing with the others. I really believe that this would help us somewhat, instead of constantly putting it in there and then put it into a CD, and yeah, we're collecting interest off them. But meantime, our taxes are still paying it initially. That's my thought.
Has anybody got a question of, do they understand the difference between undesignated and designated? Undesignated used to be called surplus, and towns used to say, that's my money, I want it back. Well, they changed it to undesignated. I don't know who, but somebody did a number of years ago, because undesignated money means it has not been designated to any expenditure. But the rule of thumb is you need 3 months worth of money, bills, to pay, because you start your town year on July 1st. Your tax bills don't go to September. So if you don't have that undesignated fund balance, you have to get what's called a TAN, tax anticipation note, which I would advise on any extreme. The city I worked for that was on the verge of bankruptcy, I told them, tear that up. We got to find another way out of this, because the interest and everything that goes with them is not good. Why pay interest on stuff? So the undesignated fund balance means it isn't designated. What you do when that gets up to a certain height, because everybody sent the revenue we didn't expect to get, you put that into capital, either into the budget to offset it, or capital roads, capital and so forth, because undesignated leaves it in an account, and that's where Washington County got into trouble. There's a state limit on county how much they can have in that fund. And they overdid it, so they used it for 3 years, reducing, so they wouldn't have to raise the county tax. Then at the end of 3 years, they had to make three years worth of increases for that amount of money. So it happens. But the other thing is, it doesn't mean it's cash in the bank. So you might not have that money if you don't have at least, I mean, I could tell you I studied it. Limestone has a good pay the tax rate over 90% the first year. That's absolutely quite fantastic, because a lot of towns aren't near that. But when you don't put your bill out for 3 months and people don't pay the taxes on time, you've got to have the money, you've got to borrow the money. It's just the facts of the financial system that's out there. And a lot of people think it's just money you don't need. Well, it doesn't even mean you've got that money. If you don't have your fingers on where it is, if you've had a bad year, and I'm not so afraid of the virus as I am the unintended consequences that are going to come after it, with the loss of revenues and everything else that's going on, and the free fall the state and federal government's done with money. Yeah, I'm not going to have to pay my $1,200 back, but they're going to get it out of me one way or another because they didn't have it to give me in the first place. So what it is can we find a better way to do the budget and have better control over it and know and understand those things? And that's what I've offered to bring, and it makes my job easier if I don't have to do it. But it's a step to try to get out of what's going to be a long, painful step out of it. Did the town make the right decision on education? I don't know, but they made it. Did the town make the right decision on the ambulance? I don't know, but they made it. Maybe they all have to be reviewed again. But being able to do it in the next 2 weeks is probably unlikely. And so all I'm trying to be is the bearer of news. I'm not taking a side on anything, offering what I think can help you out. And that's it. So other than questions.
So what we need to do, both the budget committee and the selectmen need to come up with yes or no's for each, whether you want to do it by department or by line, I don't care. But we need to have that so we can put it in the report. And if we say no to the school budget, so be it. That'll force them to either have to change it or try to go for it the way it is. Because if we wait for them to change it, just like the other communities, they went to town meeting without it and said no. And it forces them to do something. And that's where we're at.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but this is Kathy. Yeah, I know you were looking for Mr. Dobbins a few minutes ago, and he has now joined. He was between meetings. If you have questions for him.
Okay. Well, I passed out the sheet that I told him I would, so. Anyway, selectmen need to choose the budget committee. So how do you want to do it? You want to do it by line? You want to do it by department?
I can pull that back up if you want to do it by department.
I prefer to do by department. That'd be.
Beat this to death by that.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see is by department.
Departments are fine.
Fine.
Okay, let's start down the bottom and work our way back to the tough ones. There's 5 of them on here because the CEO is considered a contractor separate, but you have to have the position whether it's contracted or not. So it's been separated and I've left it separated. Typically it's under administration, where it's contracted is fine. So I don't know if you want to do them. You want me to read them off or blow it up a little higher?
Yeah, I think this.
Are we doing an order on this sheet, Bud, or how are you doing it?
You want to do it on the, tell me which one you want to do and I'll go to that sheet.
I don't care. That's fine. Start backwards.
All
Good.
your sheets have started with admin, so I think that's where we need to start.
Those are right in order on your sheet. That's the.
Okay, so
And this cost occurred because of health insurance, correct?
Health insurance and me.
Okay. We've gone over that.
yeah, at the last meeting, I think I identified where some of them were.
Yeah, I heard you mention I had to leave, but yeah, no, I'm clear. That's good.
But if anybody has a question, where the difference start, but as you see, it's just a slight increase there. And most of it is due to the town manager's salary and the insurance.
I do have a question.
So if we go to our sheet that we got last week, the bottom line for admin, if I'm not mistaken, 279,419.
Right.
And on this sheet, it's 277,230.
Right, that's what I'm saying, and we made some of the changes that were brought up last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The only changes we've made, so anybody knows, was what was brought up at the meeting or errors in the way they were being bookkept on how you, every check that you get from employment has to be taxed. So when we give somebody the stipend for not having insurance, it has to be taxed. And the way it was being book kept, it's okay out on the town side of it, but it was showing up wrong in the way the lines were there.
So there's no raises, it's just you're in the insurance, correct?
Me being hired in the insurance, and if there was anything we could cut because something was left out, but in general, this is pretty much the budget. And we went to this simply because, and I've talked with the department heads about it, and the fact is, we're in a position where we've got to fight for our lives, and they understand it. Are they happy? I don't know if we could ever make everybody happy. We just do our best.
And there was a very small increase too under the legal expense, because based on this year's expenses, that was only about a $500 increase.
Okay.
But I brought that up the last week.
I'd like to have a better idea of what you're talking on, the increase in the mill rate. You look at the one we're looking at here, you're looking at $100,000 difference. I mean, you don't set the mill rate until what, October or something, based on the state evaluation, correct? Any new property that's
No.
developed, or what?
The state valuation should be done.
Well, that's when we get it.
Huh?
That's when we get it.
Oh, so, okay, they're probably, and this year they're probably going to be further behind, yes. It's,
So, I mean, what are we looking at for the mill rate increase? What's it gonna cost a person that's got $100,000 home? What's the difference that we're looking at?
well, if I get some idea of where we're going to be, I've kind of,
If we pass this budget.
If we pass everything right now as it is.
there's a way to do that. I don't have that right now, but I have the way to do that. And we could talk about it because everybody could look at it and say, well, if the mill rate is 25, this, you're probably talking $7 or $8 per thousand. Is that right? We just come up with?
If we approve both the school and the town,
Yes.
then I see it. So I see it a little bit more than that.
How many mills in the town?
You pass this budget, well, what did you figure out what the mill is gonna be right now?
It's
We pass it as it is,
23.30 now.
24, pretty much, 23 and a half. I think it's 24, right?
3.25, I think.
Right now.
According to the way I figured it, just based on this year's everything, it's almost 4 mil for the town because of the ambulance and the first responders, basically.
So if you did that in the school, hypothetically
If you did the
speaking,
school,
you're talking 11%.
That's almost 7.
You're talking 11%. That's crazy to talk.
Two together or?
That's two together, it'd be 11% if you pass them both, right?
11
That's right.
mills.
Mills, I'm sorry, yes.
That's just a rough number though, because I just took the mill rate now being 53
I
based
bet
on
you'd be
last year
close.
and this year. So
It'd be
that's
close.
just to give us an idea of where we're at.
But if you pass the town, it'll be 4 mills. If you pass this, just this budget you're looking at.
Right.
And that's if
But
the
it's,
LDA doesn't pay.
No, that,
Well,
no, that has no bearing, no.
You're raising the funds for the
because
LTA.
we have to vote to put that back in there.
Well, but if you do, then it would have no bearing.
Right.
If they paid you, it'd
If
be a
we did it
wash.
that way. But right now, the way it's set,
So take that out, what is it? So it'd be 2 mil, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Still a lot, 9 mil, my God.
does that answer your question?
$900 on a $100,000 home.
That's all right.
Mm.
Well, the way I look at it, if there's 11%, I'm looking at the mill rate right now where you have at 23, so it's half again. So with my taxes on my house, I'm looking at almost a $2,000 bill, whereas last year it was $1,200.
But you got
That's what I'm looking at.
15 homes this year that you've tax acquired. Can you imagine how many homes you're gonna have next year tax acquired?
I'm just saying, that's.
A tremendous amount.
I
Yeah.
thought at the last meeting, the school said they were at 4.25 mil with taking what they were out of the reserve.
That's not the way it works out.
No.
Plus, if they keep taking it out of the reserve, I mean, that's a
We're
Band-Aid.
just deferring it.
That's a
They
Band-Aid.
were giving 200,000.
You're gonna have to pay it eventually.
Absolutely, next year.
Yeah, it's that right here.
150,000 is what they told us.
Well, they said 200,000.
Last year, they took 250.
It's still a Band-Aid, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Because next year, we're gonna have
It's
to
all
pay
gonna
that.
go up.
Right.
It's all gonna go
Substantially.
up. So.
Anyway,
All right, move on, I guess.
so what are your wishes on?
Yes or no on this one, is that what we're doing?
Yep.
So you're looking at $100,000
Let's
difference.
ask the Board of Selectmen first, so I can write down.
So you're looking at what, 100,000 almost?
Those in favor of admin 277, 232, 39. So indicate. Okay. Any opposed? One abstention?
No, I'd like to cut everything, but we can't, so we'll move on. I'll be for
I
it.
can go back to Florida.
Huh?
I can go back to
No,
Florida.
no, I'll keep you.
Okay,
We're all gonna join you.
so now,
Yeah, I'll be right behind you. It'd be cheaper for me to live.
Okay, budget committee, where do you stand?
We can discuss the other ones.
Administration,
Yes.
I need a motion.
Make a motion.
accept it.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Okay, we got that one.
Oops, you got the numbers? You, well.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay,
I'm just putting passed or failed. Unless there's a, if there's a split.
Nobody asked on the other end of it, but mine was no. So,
Okay.
okay?
Well, in that case, I do need numbers.
You have to do it again, yeah.
So
You'll have to vote again,
How
Tom.
many were in favor?
Let's do it legally.
How many were in favor of the budget?
1, 2, 3. Only 3, 4? Okay. And
Who's opposed?
1.
All right, that's not me, that's you.
This phone never stops.
Somebody.
My God, 12 phone calls already.
Okay. All right, next item. Code enforcement. 22,592.
So move.
Second.
Now we gotta do the selectmen first.
Oh,
Wake up, guys.
come on.
I'm just standing up so I can see what's going on.
I'll motion to approve code enforcement.
Second. Been moved second. All in favor? Okay, any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, budget committee,
So move.
Second.
moved and seconded for the code enforcement. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Only 3?
Anybody opposed?
Gotta hold your hand up a little longer. Rick.
One abstention.
Okay. Public Works.
So moved. Second.
Moved second. All in favor? Okay.
Budget committee,
So move.
Second.
moved and seconded for the public works. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? One abstention.
Okay. Police.
So moved.
Second. Second. All in favor?
Budget committee, the police department. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? those in favor?
Question,
Go ahead.
is it legal for her to make the motion where her husband works for the police department? Just
Probably.
asking the question.
No, probably not. No.
Probably not.
About as legal as him being on the board. I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Police department.
Can I vote now?
I don't see how.
No, you should sustain, you should sustain.
Anybody opposed?
Can I oppose?
No.
I just want to raise my hand.
4 and 1,
And one
right? Is that
abstention.
what you had?
Yeah, one abstention.
Fire. Motion to accept fire.
Second.
Let's have his second.
I second. I
For the
second.
fire.
I'm not writing down motions and seconds because we
That's all
don't
right.
send that down report, so. All in favor then?
No discussion.
We already had discussion.
Be honest.
Well, Fred, did you? Oh, never mind. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
budget committee on the fire department.
So moved.
Moved and seconded to accept the fire department. More discussion. All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
I can't vote.
Pass.
No, I can't vote.
So 4, 1, 1.
No, it's like this whole place. Really only on this guy in this whole place.
Because it's on the fire department.
Right.
Chris is on the fire department. Fred's on the fire department.
I want a divorce.
Truly that should have been done.
What do we got?
I don't know how that works.
If you have financial gain at all, you
Yeah.
cannot, you have to sustain. So if these guys get a check, then they have to sustain, so we should vote ours over again.
But at town meeting, I can vote.
Yes,
That's correct.
everybody.
Right.
Okay, so
We have to do ours again. Can make the motion again?
I'll second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Yep.
okay, let's have a discussion now. Any discussion on? Okay, all in favor then? 3, okay? And any
To sustain.
opposition, so we're gonna put it down as 2 abstaining?
Yeah.
Okay. And the other one was 4, 1, and 3, okay. Library.
Where's the library here? We're
We
going.
haven't got there yet.
Okay,
Well, it's actually shows up later.
where are we at? Well, library.
Order. Library, we should be on library right now.
Okay.
All the departments
Should be better.
No.
I bet, I'm just saying, somebody's sheet should be better.
If you go to the other report, you'll see that they're in order.
How many reports you gonna give us?
Gary, I'm talking about the
Well,
last.
this is the one you told us to go out tonight. It doesn't matter, just do it.
Motion to accept library.
Second. Move and second. Any discussion? Make sure we're on track. Okay, all in favor then? Unanimous, okay?
Budget committee, library.
So
We move in second to accept the libraries and more discussion. All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
So,
4, 1.
Abstentions.
2 abstentions.
Yeah, great.
Any opposed, was there? No. Okay, 0 and 2. Okay. Rec.
I have a question on that. Okay. Does he have, since his program was kind of altered by the COVID-19, does he have any carry forward? Did he spend all his money or does he have still money in his account from this past year?
There's still money in there. Because a lot of the programs for the youth weren't done. Swimming wasn't done.
So,
The budget should be kept.
so he's asking for a $658 increase, but I'd make a motion that it should be funded the same as last year at the 89,750.
Where are you at?
It's an $850 one. You do?
I'm on this
You
page.
did the math? Well, it just says over here.
I don't know about that.
I looked it up.
I'm looking at mine.
Recreation, it's the.
Yeah, I forgot my calculator, should have brought it. Maybe you're right, probably are.
Oh, that's his note.
That's the trouble with the fluidity.
I'm going off your notes, but
It's, believe me, this thing is a living, breathing document. And that's one of the hard parts of doing the numbers because as long as I'm cutting backwards, but putting stuff in the right things. Which one are we on, library, recreation?
Next one.
650 is what it is.
$650 is there. And that's the difference between the budgets. And let me back up here a second. It's an office expense.
It's
And
because of the internet, remember? we talked about
yes, it's the internet connections for them.
That's why the increase, because we put the
And-
internet up there so the kids would have it.
And,
Some of this budget he still has.
oh,
Right, but.
he's got 26,
Use it next year.
he's got $26,000 left in there that could be used to offset.
Well, he's got $26,000 in there, so there'd be no reason to give him
Any increase?
Well,
an increase at all.
but if you carry, are you going to carry it forward?
26,000.
So he just figured it out.
No.
I just figured it
But
out.
you would have to make a
He's got-
motion at town meeting in
Exactly.
order to enable
Right.
That's what I'm
money
saying.
to be carried
It's-
forward.
Yes,
Other than that, it goes
It
to the
goes-
general fund.
that's
Because
Well, right,
just
but you
just
could just
because
do
of
the
the
89,000 now, though. I'm saying, why would you give an increase? That's all I said.
It's-
Try to
it's
offset.
because-
Canceled this year, as opposed to is he gonna have any canceled next year?
he would have used
You
it,
know what I'm saying?
so.
But you got the
Why
whole
it's
summer to
still in
save
there.
it. You're probably not gonna get going again until like September, October.
there was other things other than just programs canceled that
Yeah.
is making that over 26,000.
Yeah.
There's quite a few projects.
Well, none of this part-time help that does the stuff has worked. So,
We have no
But there was
expenses.
quite a few projects that we had scheduled to get done that didn't get followed through on
Right,
in order,
You mean the bathhouse stuff you're talking about?
bathhouse, tennis courts, there was a bunch of stuff in there.
How much was that supposed to be?
some of the stuff.
We don't know because we didn't get bids, right? On the bathhouse. I don't think we ever got a bid on the bathhouse, right?
I guess.
is that the bathhouse at
We had to
Trafton Lake?
back out.
Well, that has to come out of Trafton Lake, so.
Yeah, that's.
Right, so that'd have nothing to do with that. So all it would be is the tennis court.
We
And the
have
lights.
discussed that at a meeting, that we're gonna keep it separate. We've already taken action.
Everything we talked about Trafton, Chris, we said was gonna come out of the Trafton.
We went ahead and we went through the process and put it in the budget and went out to bid even in December.
Okay, but at our meeting, we talked about Trafton being a separate entity and responsible for its expenses. So where else you gonna take it then? The bathhouse is Trafton
So, but you appropriated it within that rec budget last year.
last year. That's what I'm saying. And we're still waiting to go out again. So if we get it out in time, it's good.
I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm confused now about it.
I don't see where you're.
So you put the money out of the traffic, so now you're not, you're gonna put it back into that budget for the rec director, we're gonna take it out
I'm
of
talking
Trafton
about
Lake.
next year's stuff. That's all I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
Right now, we can't roll his money this year into his account.
Right.
We can't-
No, unless the town meeting, but I'm saying I wouldn't give any increase, I'd just leave it
No,
alone.
I wouldn't go with an increase.
You're only talking $650. I mean, I'm sure they're gonna have that left over. That's all I said.
Yeah, but that won't roll.
But I'm saying, you can't take that for this year.
I'm not-
Because it doesn't roll back in.
I'm not taking it. I'm not talking about the $26,000. I'm just talking about what's in front of us right here. That's all I'm talking about.
You're just gonna cut the program at 650.
Right, that's it. That's all I said.
So will you be satisfied with it just being the same amount?
As last year. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying rolling any money or doing anything else. I think that, you know,
Something's gotta get cut in there then, because he's gonna have those programs next year is what I'm saying.
But the budget starts in July. I feel that they're probably not gonna get started until like August or September this year before you're allowed to probably get together, just on that knowledge, that's all. That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's pennies anyway. It's not,
Your guys' decision.
it's pennies anyway.
$1,000, that'll go a long way towards the,
Yeah.
snow rate, you know,
You gotta start somewhere.
I don't think so.
you can't.
As I said, municipal service is usually the ones that get cut.
Well, I think that if we changed it like 20 years ago, like the base wasn't here, we wouldn't be in this condition. That's my opinion.
Anyway, we need a motion on the floor, so all in favor?
Return.
Take this. What's the number down, minus the 650?
$89.
Well, actually, the motion was for this, so are you amending it?
I'm amending it, yes. I'd like to amend it back to 89,750.
You're not going down to this, not going down to this.
No, it's 90,600.
9,400. So you're saying 89?
750.
Is there a second? Seeing no second, then the motion fails. So we're back to the original amount. All in favor of the original amount of 90,400. Opposed? Okay, budget committee?
So
For your second. Raise your hand this time.
I said second. It's cold.
Moved and seconded to accept the 90,400. Am I correct?
90,600.
400 on this.
No, 400 on this 90,400. 650 is what we were taking out of that. That's
I got
why,
the rec here, $90,600 on your sheet.
that's the original. Remember last week we talked about some of the changes? One of them was
that?
the motion is 90,400,
That's right.
and it's been seconded.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Motion passed with one abstention.
You didn't say opposed.
You opposed?
Yes.
One opposed.
411, okay?
Thank you.
No, and when they started putting adult and senior citizens on the rec for things to do, then I might approve.
They don't,
Well, let's
they don't have senior
take
events?
that,
Point well taken.
pass it on.
See?
They don't have senior events?
Yeah, the only thing they have is the walking.
They used to have dancing or something, I guess.
They used to.
They have the pool if it reopens.
Is the rec, speaking about, is the rec director out of school here? Is he working all day now? Because I seen the highway mowing that we had talked about before I forget that the rec director should be mowing, not working from home. Is that all spaced around?
It's been brought to my attention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The debt retirement totals.
Yeah, motion to approve debt retirement.
Second.
Need a motion in a second, okay? Any discussion on them?
What the hell is this now?
All in favor then?
There's 1,372.
Yes. Okay, all in favor? We can do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay.
Budget committee on the debt retirement.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's passed with one abstention.
Okay. Economic and community development. Selectman? Mr. Wicks,
So moved.
Second.
been moved and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor then? All opposed? Okay.
Economic and boards.
I make a motion that it's 0, and I'll have, if I get a second, I'll speak to my motion.
We're your second.
With what? What are we voting second?
Economic and community development.
Development.
Right now, it's set at 5,000. They wanted
Made a
10.
motion, zero.
Oh,
No, motion's lost because of second.
Understandable.
Okay. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
For your second.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
Great.
Greg's president of the
How's it
LDF.
possible he's the president of the LDF?
Yeah, that's the line, huh?
Guess you gotta call somebody.
But he's not getting any economic gain out of it himself. Right.
I'm just raising the question.
That's why I'm kind of close to this.
All right, let's try that again. Anybody want to make a motion?
I make a motion, I vote on
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Who seconded to fund $5,000? Any more discussion?
It's just the fact that when we were, if you were in town at any time before this man was hired as town manager, some of these selectmen, and I won't name names, were going around bragging they had found somebody that could take care of all the economic development. He was an expert at it. And I've got people that are willing to come and quote and be quoted that they did say. So
that.
you're paying him $65,000 over what the other people were being paid in this town. He's getting 65, 50, 55 was the most. So then that 5,000 should be taken out and he should have that responsibility. That's one person's opinion.
Can I speak?
I'm
Can I
taking,
speak?
I'm taking that responsibility.
Board mind if he speaks? Yes,
Okay, the original request was $10,000. 5,000 of it was for payroll. The other 5,000 was for the office expenses, for the orator, for the planters, for any possibility of grants and so forth. This is where it was supposed to work into. So the 5,000 was taken out for the payroll, which would have been for whoever the director is. And we said he had experience. I never heard that expert until the other night, somebody said that.
I said,
Okay, I'm just saying.
and I'll bring you names that you can go talk to.
Well, we've got our record, so we can show it.
I heard the same thing. too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who said it because we were very explicit about that.
But we're talking about the LDF here, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
They're required to show you their financials as to where their money's coming, what monies they have and what monies, how they're spending money, because, I asked this question. Because in addition to this $5,000 that they're operating with throughout the year, they've got or last time I was there, had a large CD, $30,000 that they could draw down on. So I don't have a problem with funding, for office supplies, things like that, so I don't have to draw down on a CD. But I think grants and other things that they want to, what's that CD doing?
Yep, and that's correct. And that's why last year, as a board, we said we didn't want to fund it because we had no way of showing where the funds were going. And so if you remember,
That's kind of a bunch of bullshit,
well, we talked about it.
The board has always supposed to have had a representative on there. The treasurer always has open books. So if you don't know where the money's going, it's because you don't look. Now, $5,000 or $10,000 or $0 is not gonna do very much economic development in this town. We're not gonna bring in another processing plant. We're not gonna probably do very much, maybe enough to pay the franchise fee, whatever that is, to the state for the federal government, whatever we have to pay. And maybe to pay this year, we'll probably pay to do the planners again or something. But I mean, if you don't have active people working in it, and anybody that wants to do, I mean, we had an individual here that I thought did a pretty good job. We brought in $5,000-6,000 grant for the library for computers and stuff. we had some successes, but we don't, I mean, cut the $5,000. I mean, nobody in this town wants to do anything. I mean, I'm sure that 5,000 was more than Jimmy's 650. Cut it out. I don't have to be president.
Well, that's my point is, the way it was split out to us, 5,000 of it was payroll. That's why there's still 5,000 in here. That's what was requested. The other 5,000 for payroll, he's taken over that responsibility. We didn't need an administrator there.
Pay twice.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I got to tell you, I am completely confused because I thought it was a department of the town.
No.
Because everywhere I've ever been, economic development's been a department of the town. And so there's a list of different things they spend it on, but basically this is just another one of those funds of money that you're sending out like to the Chamber of Commerce or to the Veterans Medical Center or whatever. So what you're saying is we now have flooring development and we have limestone development, but we don't have a town economic development.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. I'll stay out of the $5,000 because that belongs down in that group of other funds that I thought that there was something. And I'll tell you, I'm no expert, but if anybody wants to see the numbers I've worked with in my life, I'd be glad to show them to
I can tell you from my time on the LDMs that they're not wasting this money.
No.
It's being spent on things to help beautify the town, hire grant writers. I don't have a problem spending some money there. I think the selectmen should have somebody on that committee and see what's going on. I think we should better account for our budget.
And I did go to meetings when we could go.
I'm just used to the fact that the town has economic development, the committee works with the town. And it's kind of,
No, I have no problem with that. It's fine, the 5,000, and because we discussed it at the meeting, 5 was for the meeting and 5 was for an employee. And so we, like we said, we took it to him, take that responsibility of the employee, so.
Okay, let's get back to the budget committee. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? And I abstain. Motion's carried.
My purpose, by the way, just as a note, I'm not going after the LPF. I'm going after the selectmen for the amounts being shot off at the house.
Insurance lines.
hey, when I come here tonight, I thought I was going to be the head of limestone economic development, so. Yes, I'm not. It's
I
just,
apologize, because I came in the other day. Talked a little bit about it, that the way things were.
it's, every place I've been in, it's been a town function. It still has all the people, but the town's the one that goes after the grants, and that may be what some people, I've got a lot of money in grants. Show you the.
Over the years, the LDF has brought in a lot of money.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
grants.
Yeah.
There's
Done the head of law.
It's just,
Very well, when I was young.
a lot of history behind it. I mean, the $30,000 they talk about is not really, there are some stipulations that were supposed to be attached to that, but enough time has gone by now that people kind of forget. And I think if one more person dies, then probably nobody will cry when the town takes the $30,000 and spends it to buy a car for you, something or whatever.
I was just surprised. I thought it was a town umbrella, so it's an umbrella I'll participate, but an umbrella I'm responsible
Down
for.
payment on a wooden moose.
I talked to him with that. I talked to him with that. I said one more person. I said, he's already given me the stories.
Okay, motion to approve insurance.
Second.
Seeing none.
Move to second. Favor. Abstention.
The next one is broke out from where it was. So I think we need to take a couple lines here separate. Originally, it was all under social services. I don't know how you want to handle this one.
You could do it under either, I believe I have them. Depending on which way you, if you want to continue to call them social services. Find the way to count here.
Well, as he proposed earlier, ambulance is felt that it shouldn't be under social services. It should be a separate line entry. So right now, the way it was presented to us in your original package, it's under social services. So how do you want me to present it?
I'd like to see the ambulance its own line at this time.
Okay.
In the ambulance, there's that line up here in the beginning. Right here, ambulance and first response, that's the number. And as I understand it, will be invoiced for $207,600 and $13,000 is for the first responders. Is that correct? Somebody?
So we're 13,000 and some change for the first responder program.
Right.
And then I've got 203.
203,600.
So let's go with the 203,600 for the ambulance.
So moved.
Second.
So moved second. Any discussion on the ambulance?
I'd like to make a motion that we amend it and not pay LDA's portion because we can't successfully show where it follows through. Even on the custom budget report from 610, we don't show the income within that report that we present.
It will be there.
But I know that if I don't raise the funds, that we won't have to raise the taxes for that portion.
Yeah, and if they don't pay it, you
Have a special town meeting
Yeah. I'm gonna
Special
pay it
town meeting.
anyway.
and then send out a supplementary tax bill.
So,
And it could be probable, it could be very probable that
I just tried to break it out the best I know how.
Yep. I make a motion to amend it to 117,100. I believe that's the correct amount, including the first responder program.
what did you have?
117,100.
Yep, that's what I got.
Okay.
Well, 118,000. That's what I got. 203 is 101,500. Plus 13. I still come up with 128.
I guess before we even figure it out, we gotta see if anybody's going to second
That's
that
true.
or not.
Lost. So is there? Go back to the original motion then? 2,200, 3,600. I'd like to see 2,000. For the
Jim?
ambulance?
No.
And 13,000 for.
So moved.
First responder.
I'll check when I get back. If it isn't in there, I'll make sure it
Is
is.
there a second?
Well, if his motion failed, we're already back on our motion, aren't we?
Yeah,
Well, that's
but,
true, because he made the amendment.
yeah, I did make the motion and
Yeah,
amend it.
yeah, good.
So We're just
All I
looking,
heard was.
we're just looking for a
I
second.
went with
You
that.
second it?
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor then?
I have a question. And maybe I will return to this. But we have first responders. And the first responders come online. The way the ambulance is evaluated is by how quick somebody goes to service that patient. Have first responders in the town, it should be within minutes, much faster than Caribou coming in. But they're gonna show a benefit to their service at our dawn. Is that correct? Knowing how this works.
There's a whole lot of yes, no, and maybes in that question, because if you don't have first responders that are set to respond all the calls, then every call that none of them get there before the ambulance. It's a very complicated.
Yeah, I know, that part would be washed, but if they do respond to every call, 90% of them, it really makes that service look much better. And their insurance or their rating goes down, and it costs them less to run the service. This is what
Fred,
this is what I found out.
At the end of the day, the motivation for a first responder program or first responder system, I believe, is solely for early intervention of the patient, so that we can get someone who's having
Oh, no, I don't disagree with that,
Yep.
but at the end of the day, it's also gonna make the Caribou service look much, much better.
I agree wholeheartedly that we need to go back and work on coming up with a more successful plan with Caribou.
Not gonna happen.
Presuming I'm still employed, my intent is to have somebody from the budget committee or two and somebody from the selectmen department to sit down and take every department, because there's no easy way out of where we stand. You can dislike me because they hired me, whatever you want to do, but there's no way we're going to get out of this if there's not some continuity and studying what our options are. Some of them might not be very quickly done, but we got to know what they are, because the townspeople are going to expect us to be probably a lot more on top of it than we show on TV tonight. And I took full responsibility the day. Anything before 8 o'clock on May 18th, I take responsibility for, because it doesn't matter who did it wrong. We've got to get out of this hole. And one of the ways is the ambulance one is a long process. Twice in my life, I've had to start ambulance services. And it's not easy. It's a lot of money, but there's ways to get there. We've got to talk to the county. We got to do a lot of things. When we talk about the Loring Development, I'm more concerned right now 4 years long-term is what's going to happen over to Loring. That would be a bigger worry for me, because that's a lot of property and a lot of place out there. So we've got to start looking at every one of these departments. How are we doing it? Everything's got to be on the table. And what is it that people want? And I couldn't do that in the 1 month I've been here. And that's why some of these numbers changed on every sheet of paper. Because the first document that I had was done, I think, in February, which had the economy up through to January, which was very good. And the prospects were very high. Now we've got all these other things. And that's why I said we got to bring the budget back to zero to at least show that we're trying to hold the mill rate on what we can do. And if people don't want to do that, they don't want to meet till next February, March, that's okay. But I'm going to have to sit with every department head, and it'd be nice to have some people put input into it, because it's going to be a long road to haul. That's just my view of what I see needs to be done. And
So we have a motion on the floor.
Seconded, yeah, we already did.
Yep. So all in favor?
Excuse me.
Budget committee on the ambulance.
I'm moving on funded at all.
Do we hear a second?
Not
Not
funding.
funded at all.
The amended, yeah.
Motion fails due to lack of a second. Do we hear any other motions?
I'm moving funded at $50,000 and tell Caribou that's all we're gonna pay, because they shoved it down our throats. All we're doing is cutting the cost of their fire and ambulance department. $200,000. I don't know what they pay now, but how many mil is that to Caribou? $200,000. That's what it is. So it wasn't based on any fair.
Do we hear a second to Greg's motion? Motion's lost due to lack of second.
Well, I'll make the motion that we fund it for the full amount, and I don't really care one way or another.
we hear a second?
I second
Moved and seconded to fund it for the full amount. Any discussion?
it. Yes. I recommend that somebody look into it immediately.
We are, we're trying to go to Mars Hill and stuff, talk to them, and we'll try to
They
do
got
better.
to work the system down there.
25,000 apiece, and they did it within 3 months. So yeah, we're looking into that. We actually talked about it today, so we're.
And it's one of the things that originally they wanted a 3-year contract. They gave us 1, so it gives us time to make the changes that we need to this year.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? I guess it's a tie, 2-2.
Yeah.
Abstentions.
Okay. Motion passed.
Okay, but there must be 1 abstention too, because that's only
Right
5.
here. Right over there.
All right.
2 abstentions.
Wait a minute. All right. We've only had 6 voting the whole time, so now you're saying there's
Sometimes I
7.
didn't vote.
Whatever.
Okay, got that?
Next week, the class will be on Robert's Rules of Order.
You all.
Just pass or fail.
Okay, so the rest of the numbers then. I'm just gonna go down through each of the lines now in social services. It's gonna make it easier. We can add them up later, but just so you know.
There's an amount on there.
Have it.
Yep. If it wasn't for the system we were using, it would be a lot easier.
Videos over there.
Paying a lot of attention, ain't he?
Okay,
$4,488 is all the social services.
gotta be more than that because general assistance is in there too.
I separated it as a separate line.
Assistance under a different one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if we're gonna break it down,
2640.
So which number do you want?
$26,488.
26,488.
that's gotta be right.
So move. Second.
Okay, move second. Any discussion on these? Once again, this is one of the accounts that I'm talking about at the end of the year, instead of the money that's coming back from the state. I think it should go back in there to offset this. And that way, next year, when we raise the taxes again, the money's already in that account. That's.
Or you're going to be raising less.
Right. So anyway, all in favor then? 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay,
That number does not represent what you've got.
It don't make
Within
sense
this
to me
budget.
either.
And the number that's within the budget doesn't make sense either.
What do you mean,
let me
lose
look at the
178?
lines, make sure that we've got it all. So for line 7501, if you look at your budget sheets, general assistance. It's down to 22,000. Okay. 7503, $463. 7504 is 0. 7505 is 1,900. Unchanged. 7506 is 1,000. Unchanged. 7507 is 0. 7508 is 775. 7509 is 100. 7511 is 250.
$42.
26, right? You got it there?
It's the summation of those right there. Unless the computer can't calculate.
No, no,
Hmm?
you don't have the general assistance in there.
Well, add the 22,000, that is 26,488.
That's right.
It's general assistance usually stands alone.
Always
Yeah,
been
yeah.
alone.
Always in the social services, that's where it's always been. If you look at any of your budget sheets, that's where it's.
Was that number I gave you accurate, or did it change? Well,
If nobody claims general assistance, it's zero.
488.
that's correct.
If people only need $100,000, it's $100,000.
26,488.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
What's the payment? Oh, I'm sorry.
so once again, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of it? Unanimous.
Budget committee, and that's what, 26,488?
Yep.
On the social service.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I do have a question. For Catholic Charities, was it dispersed for fiscal year 20?
They haven't requested it.
What about the past years?
I
That's
don't
the
have
question right
that,
there, but-
I don't have that data with me. I'll check on it tomorrow, but that's what I have for data right now.
So then, but according to this, if it hasn't been paid to them, they haven't asked for it. That's another one of those accounts.
They ask for, the way it's typically done, and I realize that we do things different here, that's no problem. But typically, there's a difference between a request and an invoice. An invoice we have to give. A request is whether or not the townspeople want to vote the money. So typically what happens is the request comes in, but they have to wait to the town meeting, and then they have to request the payment. If they don't request the payment, they don't get it. And it goes back into the general fund. Places I've been, maybe different. So we're supposed to send that out to them on the first day of July. I mean, I don't know what the plans are here. If they don't request it,
That's right.
we don't send it any place I've ever been. And in a lot of towns, it changes every so many years with the change of the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee, what charity they're going to donate to. I know 2 towns that don't donate to any of them anymore, so. It's on June 30th, it goes into the general fund. So I don't know if we're supposed to call them up and say, you want to come for your money, or whether you cut it out all together and just say, well, you didn't collect it, you must not need it. It's.
And then if they do call us for it.
Any more discussion?
I'm trying to learn.
All those in favor?
Oh, you can do it.
Carried. Anybody opposed? Excuse me. You're all in favor?
No.
Okay, one abstention.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't want you to.
Okay, unclassified.
Motion to approve unclassified?
Second.
And moved second, unclassified. All those in favor?
I'm trying to find it.
I'll say discussion first. I can do that. Since we didn't talk about this one the other day either. So. Any discussion? And now all in favor? Okay.
And this is my question between the two. What's the difference in some of these as to why it's in unclassified or it's in social services? We have 2 accounts and they both do the same thing. I don't just have one account.
Be easier.
I mean, the shelter for the homeless, it's got to be a social service as much as anything up in social services.
So, sure. Shelter for the homeless.
Back to you, Tom.
Okay, budget committee on social services. Unclassified.
So, oh,
Second, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Passed, 1%.
But that's probably something that you can fix in your accounting setup.
Well, it's really up to the board to give me direction to, but it would make the whole budget process in another year a lot easier for everybody to work with all the data sitting in front of them and the right accounts.
I don't mind you doing that. That's something that the future board meeting will discuss how.
Okay, the next one is reserves.
It's a mess.
There was changes here, so you might just identify so you're aware of it. 8501 is still at 1,000. 8502, it was dropped last year, and we're keeping it at that at 15. 8503, 10 last year is 10 this year. 8504, 15 last year, stayed the same. 8505 is 1,000. 8507, it was dropped last year to 2, we're keeping it at 2. 8510, 2,000 across. 8511, dropped to 0 last year, we're recommending 0 this year. What are your wishes?
Total of 46,000?
Yeah. 46,625.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor then? Okay.
Budget committee,
oh,
moved and seconded to fund the reserves at what the given amount. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried.
Any abstentions this time?
Yep. Carried.
Okay. No opposed? You didn't ask.
Everybody's names are coming for.
I'm just looking because I'm still only coming up with 6, so. Okay. Not yet.
What's next?
We can do that because I don't have it on this sheet.
What county tax?
How much to say about that, so I didn't put it in here.
There.
Which one?
County tax.
County tax,
So county tax.
Seconded.
any discussion on county tax? All in favor? Okay.
Budget committee on county tax.
second,
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Everybody voted that time.
Really? Okay.
One opposed. Great.
One opposed?
Yep.
Oh,
Besides the name, what do we get from the county? Nothing.
well,
You did pay the bill?
yeah, so the plowing. So 6 and 1 then? What's the next thing on there?
Solid waste.
So moved.
Solid waste, yep.
Second.
Okay, move to second, solid waste. Any discussion? All in favor then?
Well, are we still getting checks from that?
Every January, well, this coming January will be our last one.
That goes in that designated fund when we get it. How much money is in on this meeting?
Do you know, Bud? No.
Once we get past this meeting, finding out where our money is
Next
it's
week.
a long ongoing process through auditing that goes back 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
It's all there. It's just a matter of whether it's in what account.
Yeah, and some of it's in CD, form of CDs now, so, yeah. Okay, Tom.
Okay, solid waste. Moved and seconded to approve solid waste. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's passed.
One abstention again.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one then.
Insurance.
Oh, we already did.
Oh, we did, I'm sorry.
Public safety.
Let me go back, probably so. Half asleep.
So we talked about earlier, the lighting is still under question. So we're funding it at what we requested last year, 11,000. What it was?
85,500.
For the total, I'm sorry, I'm looking at one line. Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, 85,500.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Been moved second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Yep.
Public safety. Moved and seconded. Public safety. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Passed, one abstention.
That was at the school, or what are we at now?
What's account 92? I didn't put it. Somebody have it. I need to public, your phone.
What is it?
The county's asking. Okay, so then 93 is the school. What are your wishes?
So you're looking for a yes or no?
Well, all in favor
Accepted.
first,
Okay.
a motion. Motion, one way or another.
I make the motion to send it back to them and not accept.
Well, our job tonight is to either we approve that or say no to it after a motion.
Okay.
Because we have to get it in the town report.
So if
So
I
we
say
can
no,
no,
okay, I make the
Push it back
motion to no. Okay,
okay,
okay.
I'll second that.
okay. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion?
I did.
No?
Oh, I thought we were doing discussion.
Wait a minute.
No, I thought you were doing
You
discussion.
didn't have a discussion.
Well, you can.
No, go. I didn't know. I see you looking front. I thought you were
I'm
gonna say
just
something.
looking back where I could see everybody. Okay, so 3. Opposed? Okay, abstentions?
Do you abstain from that?
I'm still digesting these numbers.
Okay,
What's the budget committee's wishes?
I move no.
Can't, yes, it's not first.
It's been moved and seconded. Vote no. Any discussion?
What does no do? We don't have to put a
No.
dollar figure.
no is for the town to know that we said we didn't like this.
We don't agree with that.
We don't agree. We don't have to put a dollar
It
figure on
means
it.
they have to go back. Work it.
You can make a recommendation.
Oh, yeah, but right now they're just saying that.
We don't have enough information yet to make a recommendation.
Well, that was gonna be my question, you know, when we
Money
have a
average,
shoot,
to what rate?
they had a budget committee meeting, everybody went to the middle school, well, 40 or 50 people did.
Yeah.
And with each line item on the budget was discussed with the superintendent there, that you could support or oppose, discuss why it was what. Do we have anything like that here in this town? We've taken. the school back?
That's why I gave you these sheets, because it has the breakdown line by line.
They actually never
Not
met
as
the
much
budget
detail
committee.
as-
No, it's not line by line, but it's better than what
It
we
is
got
line
from
by
the school.
line.
Well, it's a total, but I mean, it's like a line item, like teachers here, what you.
Okay.
Regular instruction, the teachers.
Any more discussion from the budget committee?
Sorry.
All those in favor? The motion is passed.
Any abstentions or?
Regulars.
Very abstained.
Okay.
These were actually your figures,
Yes.
not from the school.
Oh, they're from the school on a different form. I just put them into this so you can see last year's and this year's. Okay, what else we have? My last one. my sheet.
All I have.
So are we looking to meet with the school again to work on this? Because I simply don't want to just say, no, we don't want to fund it. I want the,
What about the revenue portion? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I guess.
If it doesn't pass, the way you're wording it right now, if it doesn't pass, there has to be another town meeting.
so then what good do we do to rush to a town meeting and the expense of that versus
You don't.
working with the school?
You can recommend
When
that-
they go to their budget down, like Madawaska, every time they brought a new budget back up, they had to have a town meeting.
Yeah,
And that's the route you're going right now, this is.
So it ends up costing the town another.
No,
Whatever.
well, it's gonna be, it's not town meeting.
so then why don't we table this to meet with them so that we can work through what possibly may be a solution at a minimum that we understand what their increases are derived from.
Okay.
Because if we just rush to a town meeting and fail it, we've gained nothing.
I think that's what you gotta do, because you gotta follow this, and if you don't follow this script, you don't have a town meeting period, so you gotta follow.
That's
this
what I'm
script.
saying.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing it this way. By putting our votes in there,
Yeah.
it forces them to issue.
But what happens-
We can still make a
What happens
recommendation.
if you don't follow those dates? What does happen?
You push it
Town
out,
meeting doesn't happen. We
push it out. There's a certain time frame, and then if that don't pass, you push it out again.
So if you go to town meeting and you don't pass the school budget, you've done exactly the same thing. You've just pushed it out.
I was trying,
Or maybe
well,
they'll come ahead.
The only reason why we're doing the town meeting now is that's when the governor told us to do it.
But when can we can legally still push it.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
We
get
can-
your
we can
taxes and
say another
everything will be
month.
later, you'll receive money later, but maybe by doing this, Chris, maybe they'll come ahead and they'll fix it.
But even
Well, the other part of this is the municipal part of the budget.
Yeah,
Because if you push that part out, the tax bills get later and later, the town's gonna have to borrow money again to make payroll and.
With interest.
but if you go,
So
so
if you have your
if,
town meeting and you vote the municipal budget in and not the school, it's just that piece that will have to go back for special town.
I mean, if you guys have a recommendation, like I say, I'm giving you a sheet where the breakdowns are. If you have a recommendation that you would like to put in there,
Well, the
there's no
recommend,
reason why you can't send that to the school
It's
committee.
extremely hard just looking at bottom line numbers. For cost center.
school is.
Walt, this is Bill Dobbins here. Walter,
I'm hearing you. Go ahead.
if I can help you with any, I'm right here. If you have any questions, I might be able to explain some things. The discussion going on, if it's turned down in the town meeting, the law says we have to come back within 2 weeks and do it all over again.
That's what we were just talking about.
That's right. It's 2 weeks.
Are we better off to fix it prior to sending it to the town and push out our date versus sending something that we have a high probability
so,
of failing?
so do you have a number that you would like to present?
No,
No.
because we've got to dig into these numbers and see what derived the
No,
increase.
I agree with you. I just don't know
Well,
if
he's
there's an
right here.
alternative. Ask him. Ask him, Chris, see if he can tell you what.
So
You gotta face it, boys, you gotta raise taxes. I mean, I hate taxes. I hate personal property tax. It's just so unfair, but the school department's worked hard. We voted to bring the school back, and we all knew that this could very well happen.
No, we didn't.
Yes, we
We were
did.
lied to.
Well, we may have been lied to, or we believe what we wanted to believe. It does not matter where we are. This town has cut the budget every year as much as they possibly could. I don't think since the base has been gone that we've been very extravagant. Now, last year you lowered the mill rate by a little bit instead of leaving it where it was or raising it a little bit, you know? So now all of a sudden, yes, you know, I used to buy hamburger for 89 cents a pound. I paid $2.35 the other day. Do you think that this town can run on a less budget than what it has in the last 20 years? Ever since the base left, boys, we have never faced the music.
Well, then I mentioned it last week, cut the departments.
Where are you gonna cut? Where are you gonna cut?
Highway department.
You got, I don't even wanna hear it.
Library.
I think the
Rec department.
schools should cost.
Certain costs of school can't dictate. That's gonna be the power, the heat, the maintenance of this building.
no, absolutely.
So you start cutting the school budget, from my experience, I don't know what they do with transportation, I don't know where we're transporting kids, if we're transporting Ford and Caribou or just one or the other. Just start cutting teachers or extracurricular activities. And that's where
For your major.
that's where the school committee has control over the budget. It's just like.
If I can help you guys out, I can explain some of why the increases were there. If you have a question on that.
That would be great.
The increase basically is stemmed from 4 different items. The first item is the money that was supposed to come over from RSU 39 was estimated at $223,000 based on their undesignated fund balance with a withdrawal agreement. For some reason, they dropped that down below $1 million this year, and we only received we received 149,000 roughly, some change. So that's a deficit right there. Second thing is, after the school committee has looked over the numbers, our tuition rate, which we budget at $8,800 per high school student, was raised to the state level by which RSU 39 can do to $11,000, roughly $200 per student. And so you see the difference in that amount right there. Also, we have gained from approximately 11 different new high school students coming in. So if you take the 11 students multiplied by 11,000, there's 121,000 right there. If you look at the total budget, the elementary pre-K to 8 is actually is only up by $30,000, not down, it's up by $30,000. The whole reason why the budget is so high is tuition rate, no fund balance. And last year, the community decided to take $250,000 out of the reserve to reduce the tax burden to the town. So by taking the reserves out every year, you're not coming up to the reality that you need to fund the school. I did a synopsis of all the schools around Limestone, Caswell, Van Buren, RSU 39 Caribou, Fort Fairfield, Presque Isle, and Easton. They, per student of what was raised by the town, roughly goes for about $6,000 to $7,000 per student. The amount of money Limestone raised, excluding the $250,000, was about $3,000. So you can see the comparison of Limestone to the other towns. It's not pulling a share. When you voted the school in to come back as your own district, you've got to support it. It's a bad time at this time to come because of the ambulance and everything else. We have not, basically the biggest thing is tuition, no fund balance come across. Transportation, I heard someone mention transportation. The high school students are transported, if they're going to Caribou, the Caribou bus picks them up at LCS in the morning, and in the afternoon, they deliver them back to the home. So we're only transporting elementary school children. The Fort Fairfield, kids go to Fort Fairfield, they're picked up at the LCS in the morning and dropped off again by Fort Fairfield. So the transportation part is down. We were,
It's 34,000 up is the numbers we got, Bill.
yeah, that's correct.
So
Because
it's
a
not
lot,
down.
the lot of that reason is because we had to readjust. We found the numbers that last year that was given to us from RSU 39, and I'll give you an example, which ties into transportation, ties into operation and maintenance also, is electricity. They told us we're going to spend around $40,000 for electricity for that building. No, we're up to $56,000, close to $60,000 for this year. Our fuel was way off. They didn't give us the correct answer to those. They were doing some funky accounting. I can't understand how they did it, but I don't know. I don't do it that way. So a lot of those different issues, we rearranged and put people where they needed to put. Well, the bus drivers needed to go into the bus drivers. If you know the, look at the OM part of it, operation maintenance, and I believe that is down.
What about the school administration? How come that's up 29,000?
School administration,
So obviously there's raises in administration.
that's that total, the principal and staff. The principal assigned a 3-year contract. But we only gave him a 1-year raise of $7,000. We have a secretary in there.
How much was it? How much was the raise?
7,000
Well, it's a pretty good raise.
under school administration. Under system administration, that's where you find me. I had no raise at all. I get exactly the same. I signed a 2-year contract and exactly the same amount what I started out this year. There's no raise in that at all.
So
We
there's
have
a
to rewrite-
$29,000 bill, not to interrupt, so because we're jumping around. You only come up with 7,000. What's the rest of it?
We have to put a secretary in there, which we need to put in there. The secretary, which was in there, has to go into HR, that's under the system administration to help with accounts payables and stuff like that. We were very lean on administration in that school. We only had the principal, myself, which is only there 1 day a week, more lately, about 2-3 days a week, spending time there. We
You
needed
had a
extra
business
help
guy
there.
that took care of that.
Pardon me?
Don't you have a business advisor or something? Wouldn't that be his job to do that?
He's only
Why would he not
10%
be-
of it. He's 15 to 10%. Rest of the time is technology.
Oh, okay.
We did a combination between the two. That's why we were breaking those out. We couldn't afford a full-time HR person there. So we hired a person that is qualified in technology and HR. So we broke those out. That's why then we're trying to line people up where they're supposed to be. We're not guessing anymore by their categories. And that's why there's some shiftings around there. If you notice, the elementary salaries is down because we have a retirement. Also, we're shifting one to a federal program that's paying for that. So those things are when you take the whole look at the whole thing, it's not up as bad. Overall expenditures, the expenditure big part is 2 categories. One is tuition I explained to, and special education. Special education, we have 2 students that are required by law to go to a special school in Presque Isle. Those 2 students are costing me $110,000. I have no control of that. I have to do that. The law tells me to do that. Today, we found out we're going to get additional special ed student coming in. I got to hire another ed tech. I've got to take it out of these budgets somewhere. So 1-to-1 are what we call adult supervision now for these people. This is a lean budget. It's because we come at the wrong time is why it's up. That's why the school committee said, okay, we'll dip one more time into the reserve. I cautioned them to do that. We're recommending take 150,000 out of a reserve, leaves us $100,000. We don't know, and as the town manager says, we don't know what we're going to end up with next year because of the state curtailment. They could do that. And that's why we're leaving it in reserve. It's a major problem. On top of that, we have to look at, the state laws says we have to bring all teacher salaries up to $40,000 within 3 years, starting next year. So we got to gradually move those through. So you can see it's a perfect storm for the school district. We're trying to, the school committee has tried, they've looked over this for 3 months before they presented it to anybody. They cut, they added, they changed, move people around where they, in the categories where they need to be. And I got to commend the school committee working so hard on this. It's a bad time, but that's what's happening. If we can figure out what we're going to do with the high school kids next year, either we're going to tuition them or bring them back. That might be a question that we want to solve before December, because we're looking at another 11 kids coming in on our enrollment projection for next year, which could be, another $100,000 in additional tuition. So we got to look at that real close too. So you can see the issues where we're looking at there.
So you have 11 kids in total, what he's got here now,
Right.
including kids that graduate? I guess.
Is that including the kids that are graduating? Ricky Boyer is asking.
But you're gonna have 11 more kids you're gonna tuition next year for
Yes.
high school. So how many kids are you losing to graduation?
How many graduated this year?
No, next year. You said,
He's talking next year, Bill.
Next year is we're projecting 51 students in the high school between Fort Fairfield and Caribou.
okay.
And I think there's a low 40, 41, 42 currently this year. That's why we get the increase.
So you're
And
not
then-
losing anything to graduation? They're all continuing on. They must be freshmen or whatever is what you're talking about? That's what he's asking.
Eighth grade going to freshman. Yes, that's where we're
Oh, I
getting
see
the
what
gap.
you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. That's where you getting the numbers. We did a projection. I did a survey or a enrollment projection to push that out for 5, 10 years, see where we're going. The next 2, 3 years, we got some big classes in the middle school. We have one small one, but we have some major ones that's going to affect that tuition bill as we go further on. The school committee is going to look at that real close this fall, see how we're going to address that, because that's going way out. We're sending close to $500,000 out of town because of these kids. So they're going to look at that real close. I hope some of this explanation helps you guys out. It's not a budget that is inflated anywhere, but those are the major things. Special education was a major cost, and tuition is the major cost. No fund balance is the other. And when you keep taking money out of surplus, and I think that's what's happened over the years past, it just doesn't bring up the reality what the town needs to pay for the school. You're kind of hiding it. And I think someone mentioned it's a Band-Aid. That's all it is. We got to
That's
face it
exactly
sometime.
what it is. If you can afford to face it.
How many teachers do you have below 40,000?
Right now,
Yep.
5. But we just had another resignation, so it could be up to 6. We hope to hire at the lower end.
Only makes sense.
So when you look at all the different angles that the school committee looked at, it's a major puzzle to put these things together. I know you had questions about the mill rate. I think by looking at that and reducing it by 150,000 from the reserve, we're looking at approximately, and then Walter, you can correct me on that. I believe it is about 4 mil. Is that correct?
No, it's a little more than that.
6.5, not 7.
No.
I can't-
You got $218,040.13. That's what you show for an increase.
So 4 mils, right?
Well, it's about
Well, yeah, but that says if
53,000 per
you
mil,
short
so you
them.
divide that in 218.
That's if you short them from this column, correct? Or am I looking at this wrong?
You're looking at it wrong.
So it's just over 4, yeah.
Oh, maybe, I don't know, it's confusing a little bit.
3.6.
Something like that.
So 4 mil, and you take the town is what, 2 mil, right?
No, it's 4 mil. I heard the town was 4
No,
mils.
no, we're talking about the town budget, Bill.
I know, but early in the meeting, it said 4 mils for the town.
Oh,
Which
I'm
is-
sorry, is that what it is? So it would be a total of 8 mils that we're looking at,
Total.
That's right.
which is astronomical.
It is. But I hope you understand where it's coming from. We have no control over it, you know.
That's the problem.
The other issue what we're looking at too is MSSM wants us to reduce their payment by $130,000. We can't do that either.
So where does it stop, Bill? Next year, you're talking another 100,000. So where does it even off? Is this a 5-year deal or, I mean, where do you see it evening off in an honest answer that you figured out mathematically?
If the school committee decides to bring the kids back to the high school, it'll even out next year, mathematically. If they do not decide, it's going to take 3 to 4 years to even out, because that's when then we'll start a decrease, because we'll start losing number of kids at the high school, dropping down. And that all depends on the state average of tuition. The state sets that. Right now, it's roughly 11,200. Give or to some change there. So I hope I able to answer some of the misconceptions that are out in the community right now by answering those questions you have.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
So we've already made a motion on that anyway, so you guys already did too, right?
Well, I think
You can always change them.
I brought up the question, are we stuck with this budget? And the answer was no. Now, we started out with the town budget first, and we passed them. We got snookered again.
You had all the opportunity going through the whole process to change any line or make a recommendation. Just like I made the recommendation on the ambulance with the theory that I thought it would reduce the mill rate was the reason on it. But I was a minority, so it didn't pass.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I was just afraid if they don't pay they have to go back and get the money. I don't think it's a bad idea.
That's what I'm with that. But at the same time, that's why I say if you make the other part of it.
Then it would go back and next year you'd be better, so.
Can I clarify, did I interpret that you think I snookered just?
Well, I asked the question, if we could pass that budget or not pass it, and you said we didn't have to pass it.
You don't have to.
But we're gonna be stuck with it.
What are you talking, Jimmy, as far as the school, or are you talking?
No, in 2 weeks.
No, you're not. You can send it to town, back to town, the town can vote on it. So you're not stuck with it. And it's
Okay, so
essentially.
if the town votes no, we don't have to pay for it.
No, the next meeting, you're gonna vote.
What the hell are we going through for? What are we going through it for?
If the town votes no, it goes back to the school,
Maybe they'll fix it.
to revise your budget, come back.
You think they're gonna revise it?
They're gonna have to, if you send it back, tell them no.
No, they just keep voting the same budget. They can pull that 150,000 out. They don't have to put that in there.
It's true. Yeah, but the town's gonna keep voting on it, so if they keep voting on it, then.
But eventually, I can tell you statistically, they win out.
I don't know, the town's pretty
No,
tough on.
take the chance.
Tom.
It's-
The budget committee done? We done?
That's up to you. We've done everything we can do.
Takes the motion to adjourn.
This is just a select those meetings.
In case anybody's wondering, there's nothing here that's really scared me to death. I'm used to it.
Now, Fort Fairfield was the school of choice in the withdrawal, not Carroll. And I know tuition, although the state sets tuition, is negotiable. So if you send all your kids to Fort Fairfield, you may be able to negotiate better than.
I thought I did pretty good bringing the budget back to zero.
They don't want to come.
Yeah.
No, but you don't have to pay, you can limit what the town pays for tuition to whatever.
Hey, I don't even.
negotiate. And if the parent doesn't want
I
to
think
get
four
go
was
to scare.
pretty much the same, because they're doing
No,
12,500
yeah, it was a little cheaper, but it was a 10 bucks.
Trying to get it.
No, but now we got
Their town's paying
Trying to
12,500.
get- They also talked to
Fort
them here,
River's paying 12,500
and
a kid.
Fort came back. with-
From out of their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's because it gets.
Yes, it did. High school just
I know.
negotiated.
We know.
Oh, let's see, I'm an expert in snookering. Okay, I'm doing good.
Problem is now you've made a sour taste in people's mouths to do business and it's never good. When you burn a bridge, it's usually very hard to cross.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's continue on.
I've never had no luck doing that, right? Okay, hold on, we're gonna get back into the whole agenda.
Can I ask the board a question? If
Ask
we
anything
just
you
left the budget, what it was I got here, and you could have cut it all out tonight down to where it is, would everybody be more happy?
Probably you'd feel that you
I'm not really.
accomplished
upset with
something.
the budget. I mean, that, you're.
But what was presented was a lot higher.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I think you did fine.
we made the decision on the ambulance service, so we knew what we
Is
were.
that my agenda?
Yeah, when the town chose it, we
I
all knew.
lost the Jesus agenda.
Excuse me, can I ask another question, Walt?
Absolutely. Bill.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure what was voted on. I can't figure that one out. On the school part.
The school part, they just didn't accept what was presented as a full amount.
Okay, so my understanding is when you write the booklet, you write, selectman recommends this, the budget committee recommends this, and the school committee recommends this.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if I make a motion that we'll go with the school committee, if that's how the motion should be carried, right?
Right.
Okay, or I can make a motion to go with the selectmen's recommendation.
Whatever the school puts in there, that's what it goes by.
You pass or
Do
fail,
not recommend.
it's a pass or fail.
That's it.
Yeah. That's all we did.
Right, and if
It's
it
gonna-
fails, we have to we have to set up a whole new process and go through it again within 2 weeks.
Yep,
That's
Yeah.
correct.
If the town turns it down, that is correct.
Okay. As selectmen then, what would you think the community would accept? If I have to go back to the school committee and say, okay, I'll take the pool out. We're gonna defund the pool, which is $18,000. So we close the pool down. Is that something that the community would look at, or?
I can tell you in the past, that was one of the areas that in past school years, that was brought up a couple different times. And the town wanted that to continue because of the use of it with rec, adults, so
that's why
forth.
I say you're not gonna get the
But
library.
that's where, when we went to the RSU, they started billing us for the use of it.
That's right. And right now, we took the 5,000 out, so we don't bill the town because we're part of the town. So we reduced that to the town burden to $5,000 last year. But
I think.
when
I
I'm
think-
looking at
I think the numbers,
faculty,
Bill, are very vague that we
Pardon me?
have. The numbers are very vague of what we have as far as the understanding of where you come up. Walt's done fine of like the bottom line stuff, but I think it would have been very beneficial if we could have met as two boards and had a discussion rather than just get numbers and try to pinpoint or pick apart, so to speak, with your own our mind versus what actually may have been something that could have been explained better. Does that make sense?
yes. Can we set that meeting up? Would that be good?
I'm all
I
for
really-
meeting. I'm all for trying to get work through it. You all?
Yeah, it's just that right now, the timeline, that's what we're.
Oh, we could do it tomorrow. No? When could you do it, Bill?
You gotta have
When could you do it, Bill? Could you do it tomorrow?
No, we gotta have, how long do we have to post a meeting?
Just a workshop. You don't have to do
It's a
it.
workshop.
Okay.
So anytime you meet, you gotta have it posted.
Yeah.
For a workshop,
Even if you call it.
24 hours,
You
right?
5 guys are going out to do work, you gotta post it.
So how long do you need?
24 hours if we call it an emergency, and I'd call it an emergency.
So you could have Friday. Oh, no. Well, yeah, because it's 8, 9:30. How about Friday?
I'll be in Castle to a town meeting on Friday at 6. That usually doesn't take long. I should be able to get out of there by 6:37.
That's fine with me. I'm Jimmy, but I don't know. Is it good with you all?
Well,
I mean, we can zoom in if we have to.
I'll go
Yeah.
physically. I'm there. You there?
here's what the real question is right here, is when you're looking at the full mill rate and everything we got in there, and you just got a yes and a no right now, it's up to the people to vote different. You know, there's going to be people campaigning out one way, there's going to be people campaigning out
Absolutely.
the other way. So the question you got to solve at the meeting is, how much is it going to take to convince more people to pass it after you come to an agreement than is the people that are going to be voting against it even after you come to an
No matter
agreement?
what. Absolutely.
Okay.
But it'd be good to have the knowledge, so at least when you went into something like that, you would have enough knowledge to make an educated guess or an answer instead of just on a guess that you anticipated.
The real issue, as I've said, is, and I've been digging back, I can't do everything in a month, but in digging back, the number of years that we've deflated the budget
Oh, absolutely.
would actually, over a period of time, it would have been a slow increase. And truthfully, I believe if you'd have done it over a slow increase, the total amount you would have done a lot of other things in that time frame, just like we do in our homes, some of us, to cut costs. And so,
Okay, but the point right now, we've got to decide, are we going to meet Friday?
Bud, you be there Friday?
I guess I will be.
Well, I'll be there.
As long as you're done by Saturday, because I got my nephew's wedding to go to in Eastport.
Yes.
Let me, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. If we meet with that board, where does that get us? Because we've already made a decision on moving forward. The budget committee's not being part of it, so you're gonna kind of take that one pretty quick. So to have that meeting on Friday, where does that get you? I don't think it'll get you anywhere. It might get you an answer of a question specifically, but other than that, I don't think it's getting you any.
I think it gets you understanding of the budget deeper than what we'll understand by just having this piece of paper. I mean, do I think you're gonna make different decisions? No, but at least when you go to if people ask you or something, you'll have a better educated answer to give them than, well, I don't know, because I've only seen these numbers, so I'm not even sure where the money goes.
Well,
That's my
the
understanding.
superintendent's going to be there to address those questions, not so much the board, but the superintendent and town manager is going to be the ones who address the questions.
I mean,
Not Jim Pelkey, not Chris Turpo, not Chris Pelkey.
No, but I think it should have been done a long time ago. It would have been easier with the budget committee, but it wasn't. But if you guys don't want to, I mean, I'll meet. I think it'd be good. It's good to have a relationship with the mayor. We've never even talked to them.
That's true.
But I don't understand when we should be meeting, a couple of times a year just to discuss, different things that we can help each other as a partnership. We've never opened that door yet. It's kind of like two different entities that.
They kind of are.
Yeah, well, but there's a lot of resources we could share.
Oh, I don't disagree with you.
But we.
If you go back to what I spoke of at the beginning of the meeting, that got me blown over the water, and that's okay. This is what I'm here.
So what are we gonna do about?
But the issue comes down to is, how are we going to go to the town meeting that's going to give us a place to start the day after the town meeting, to start digging into all these things? When you talk about meeting, these meetings are going to go on every month on everything, because we got to make up for that $250,000, $150,000, all these types of things.
Sure.
And no matter how you cut it, to cut the school budget and the municipal budget enough to get it down there is impossible to provide the services you have to provide. So how are we going to go find the things? An ambulance service that's quasi-municipal that covers a lot of towns that we're all invested in. What do we go, the school, the way we're doing it, the best way to do it, not only in the financial end, but what's best for our kids. There's a lot of things that have kind of set aside because there was money to cover it, so it was okay. The well is empty. We've got to literally have a new foundation to step off of, which is, as I've said to you many times, that's the main reason I came out of retirement to come here, was it's a lot of stuff to do, and this is what I'm sure the superintendent probably could be retired too if he's still there.
I am.
But you do these things because some of us care enough to do that. And I don't get offended because of, what do you call me? I got in cahoots or something. I did something wrong and I'm an expert in this. Well, totally, that, I don't pay attention to that. It bothers me that somebody feels that way without coming and asking me, because I can give them their own reasons. But this is where we're at. I've been here 30 days, and everything I've worked on should have been completed 100% before I even got here. So we've got to get that line, we got to get over it. And I'm sure the school's facing a lot of the same things, because not only did they not have a clue what the state was going to do this year, who knows what they're going to do next year? So this is big time before you even toss in the future of learning.
Okay. We gotta,
I make a motion to meet Friday with Bill and the school board
Second.
for a workshop as far for education.
Workshops, you can't vote at.
We're not voting.
Okay. It's just going to come out with a,
We've already voted on that, so that's all done. Huh?
Kathy, are you still there, Kathy?
Yes, I'm still here.
Are you able to meet Friday with this group?
Yes, I can.
Because my ultimate goal is when we get to town meeting, to be able to talk to the people and explain to them what's going to be successful, so that we don't have to come back and have a second town meeting, no matter what we voted, even at this point.
well, and maybe that PowerPoint presentation that will be on our webpage, maybe somebody from the school can give me that data. Alls I have, and it is simply the bottom line budget for taxes. I'd be glad to. Is he still there?
Yes.
I have a PowerPoint presentation that's a little different than the budget's done. It loads the Excel program that manages us down into Excel and into Word and into a PowerPoint presentation that breaks down everything within it and why we do it, why we even have a highway crew, why we even have these things. And if there's something like that that the school has, I could add it into that, because really this year it's going to be really about educating the voters before they get there, not fighting on the town hall floor.
okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Second and Tad, right? Or Chris, I'm sorry.
Okay, second.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor of meeting Friday night?
As long as with the Zoom, I got.
No, we can zoom in.
Zoom meeting.
7 PM, I believe he said.
Where are we meeting?
Well, it's gonna be a Zoom meeting right from our homes.
Well, there's not 50 of us. We could meet
How
some.
many are coming from
And
the
I'll
school?
be at the town office, because in order to put it on the community channel.
All right. So you can go to the town office, okay, Bill?
Sure, I have no problem with that.
And
I-
Kathy?
I just- Like
Yes,
I,
I can too.
Okay.
like I said, I have a town meeting and another community at 6 o'clock. I should be there by 7 at the latest.
Do I need to buy pizza?
Okay, so do you want, are you
I'll
gonna be
bring
meeting
some.
with us?
I don't mind.
on Zoom?
Not from the budget. I'd buy
I didn't hear
it.
you. I'm sorry.
Are you gonna be meeting with us?
I got a
on
pizza
Zoom?
place
I haven't
down the
eaten
road.
yet today.
But you're next to the microphone, so he can't hear me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that what that little thing is?
So are you meeting personally with us or on Zoom?
Personally.
Okay. I
Well,
just
I'll be,
wanna
in
make sure we have room for everybody if we're doing it at the town office.
Walt, I'll be at Castle, so I'll just run down.
5, 6,
10
7.
Okay.
people. There's 9 people if they all come, because Tad can't come.
Okay, that's, we still within the limits. We just have to figure out how we're gonna set everybody up in there, so.
Okay.
How many is the school board, the whole school board?
No, just Kathy and him right now.
Yes, that's wrong.
Who's gonna come, Bill? You gonna ask the whole school board? It's just you and Kathy, or?
No, I think the invitation will have to go to the whole school board.
No, absolutely, we are. We just don't know. I guess get back to, well,
Then we'll come here.
Just have it here.
we'll come to B101 then, Bill.
That will work better. Right,
Yeah, because we can
B101.
spread out better. Okay, absolutely.
Okay,
Do we want to vote on it, or because we have a motion?
no, we got a motion. So all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. So we'll see you Friday night, 7 o'clock,
Great, thank you.
or as soon as you can get there.
Thank you too, Bill. We appreciate your time.
Anytime.
Okay. So the next item we have here is town meeting schedule. As you know, some of you may know that we were given basically 3 different options to work this through. You want to talk about it?
From Madam Governor, the executive order gives us basically 3 options. I don't like any of them, but got to pick one of them. Number 1 is schedule the town meeting for the day after the election, like it would be, and meet all the requirements of the public health emergency.
That's July 14th, correct? That's, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
14th, the meetings, the election's the 14th, the meeting's the 15th.
That's what I was asking. Thank you.
And if you set up for 50 people and 51 shows up and one of them can't get in, then the meeting's canceled. Everybody that wants to come to it is entitled to be there. So that's within the guidelines of this, as we understand it. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's the ruling. So you could say, well, we'll use another room and have people in another room, like with the screen on or something like that if you have it. But then that room has to be set up in the same manner of having all the requirements of the COVID-19 plan. And then you have to have people in there because they've got to be able to see the meeting, and then you've got to have microphones for them to ask questions. And then you've got to have a voting process where you have to have people to count the votes in each room or vote on secret ballot, along with somebody to make sure the bathrooms are clean and all this stuff. So most of the towns out there are struggling with that. I don't know how many people are going to come to the meeting, but based on everything I see, that the fighting's already going on over how we should have a budget this year. That typically brings more and more people. If you set up and one person can't come in because they walk into the room and say it's in violation and they don't want to come in, we're in violation. So I'm not supporting the concept, I'm just telling you the rules. So the other option is to move it out a month. And you can move it out a month and hope that this is all over in a month. You can move it out 2 months if you want, as long as it's held by December. You can't move it into January. But once you move it out 1 month, it falls under the Secretary of State and the Department of Health. So that's another whole set of rules. So there's two options. Number 3 option, which is probably the worst thing you can think of, but it's probably the best option going, is a ballot on Tuesday and pass the vote where more people can come, you can set it up and you control it. Well, what about public input? They can bring all the public input to public hearings in advance of the meeting. So the information gets out to the public. In the ballot, you would do the warrant up, and many towns are already doing this anyway. So a lot of towns, because they're not getting the turnouts at the town meeting that represent it, they're already going to this. So for some towns, it's just doing what they do. But the governor in the emergency management declaration has waived. The only thing we have to pass is the bottom line on the school. We don't have to pass all the little incidental things we passed. It's just the bottom line. And she struck every state law there is that predicts it, so that we're innocent of whatever it is people want to complain about. All the MRSA titles have been stepped down. And in our case, you could put them in groupings where you can either do it on every article like you do, or you can put them in groupings that kind of ties it in to reduce the total amount of argument, discussion. If you think there's, I mean, if you take in group all the ones that you're going to pay anyway because they're invoices, instead of having to vote on each one where you don't have a whole lot of debate, there's ways to do that. Do I like any of them? No. I would rather have them just say, use last year's budget and go with it and figure out how to survive. But that's the 3 options. I've talked with different people who support each one of the options, and I can't fight their argument because basically what the governor is saying is you towns that still do the old town meeting where you debate on the floor don't have to do it this year. And I don't know how the population's here in this town, but in something like this, you're going to want, if you're going to do battle with education over municipal services, you're going to want as many people because people are going to be out there campaigning. And I don't know how we would ever set up for 75, 100, I don't know how many voters we have. I haven't got that far yet. But if they get into it, they all want a right to vote. And, well, we don't really have any good choices. I think it's a real tough issue to say you would go 1 year, it only allows you to do it this one time, 1 year that you would take this issue because it's so big to get the most amount of people to vote on it and at least pass or fail, you've got a pulse speed of the population.
So on your third option, if an item fails, say we didn't fail to fund the fire department,
That's,
then what's the next step if something like that were to happen?
it's the same type of thing. You hope that you put this presentation that I'm talking about, to do enough education to the number of the people that they understand the urgency. And that was my mentioning up front. If we can't leave this building amongst ourselves with some sense of, we know we've got a problem, we've got to fix it, how do we get them to vote in whatever way they want to vote? As I said, there's no easy picture, but which one do you do? A lot of people say, we'll put it off. Well, they're already talking now about, well, maybe it's going to be extended. In the fall, it might start up again. When do you bite the bullet and say, how do we get it done? And there's a group of people that say they're going to have a 4th of July event anyway. Well, not the chamber, not that, but that's one of the rumors amongst town. They're going to have a parade anyway. Well, I hope they do it like a lot of towns have, where they're in cars and stuff and people aren't standing around. I don't want to get into social political with that, but these are the facts that this is an emergency declaration. And we're supposed to, as elected officials, be following it.
So again, if something like the fire department were to not be funded through ballot voting, what would we be able to?
Special town meeting.
Special town meeting, yeah. Okay.
The trouble with the special town meetings is, I don't, and I've been in the fire service almost all my life. One of the things I've always said is, I don't want to stack, and maybe it never happened here in Limestone, but a lot of towns, they stack the meeting with firemen and then they all leave. I said, no, we're going to win because it's what the people want. And so the fire department is probably a poor example because I think everybody knows that's a heck of a buy. But, the ends that are in there, we've got to be, and that's why it's important to me that something come over this night. My next job, whether you assign it to me or not, is educating the public to the ramifications, which includes pleading to guilty for the last 5 to 10 years. We've done some bookkeeping thing, not that any of you people were on the board, but we've done some bookkeeping thing that dug this hole. And we've got to find a way out of it. And we've got to convince them that sometime in the 12 months following that, we're going to find a way out of it. Because the next year, they certainly aren't going to give us the benefit of the doubt. I don't know how else to do it.
So we need a motion to, which way to go? Is that what we're trying to do?
Well,
Date wise?
that's what we need to do tonight is.
So I make a motion to do it on the 15th.
Which option? Option 1 or option 3?
1.
In person.
In person. Trying to set this building up for as many rooms as we can.
Well, what's the third option? What was
The
that?
third option is a ballot vote
On Tuesday.
on Tuesday on all the,
So that wouldn't be, that'd be what, the 14th to be, so you do it on all the referendum on the
It would be a warrant, just like you have for your election. There'd be a warrant. The warrant, instead of it being the warrant of the town meeting, you would still have to have first thing in the morning, the ritual of all the stuff that you have to do. And then the people would have from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, plus absentee ballots to cast a vote.
You can have 50 people voting, so that wouldn't be an issue probably. Right?
No,
Well, no.
you have as many as you want.
That's what I'm saying, is you'd never go over the number to whatever the.
Yeah.
everyone would have the
Yeah,
opportunity.
just have to follow the requirements down the town.
I guess that'd be the one. I'd go with option 3 for the 14th.
It's not anything that I want to recommend, but I don't see how we're going to, we're going to already be halfway through July.
That's my motion. I rescind my first one. I say to have it both a referendum on the 14th.
Okay. I'll second it. Discussion. Should we reserve the 16th to take care of any item that,
Well, that's what I have in my notes.
okay. Okay.
I did the same thing. I put that down right away. 15th and 16th meeting.
So we'd essentially post a special town meeting for the next day if needed to deal with any matters.
I would almost say yes to that, but I'd want to verify it.
True. Yeah, yeah.
Well, in the past, we said that we always left that open as a continuation.
Ran past 9.
And we've done it many times, so when the school was here before, there was many times that we met town meeting 2 days. It never was done in one.
Yeah.
And since the school moved to RSU and kind of took that away, we didn't have to worry about it.
Because what we don't want to do is a Madawaska and drag this out till November or whatever it is. If we've got a difference, we need to discuss it, figure it out and come to a solution.
Would also the logic of moving it from the town office out to the school where the election day is at the town office?
I think we should set it up in the gymnasium.
Got more exits.
Give
Yeah,
more space.
More access
And
to set up
it's-
booths at different places so you can have more in there.
You know, if you start getting a bigger turnout, you're going to have that line of people. Fortunately, thank goodness it's not a presidential election where it's going to be.
Yes.
Because we've got to put the space lines in and all that type of stuff. And
If that's what we decide, we just need to get it advertised now.
Should be on our website and everything yet tomorrow.
Yeah, Facebook and.
And I'd like to put all the warrants, as soon as we get them published, put them all on the website so people have a chance to review.
Yep,
and
any
study
questions,
them.
reach out.
with a big explanation,
Exactly.
So-
Has it.
I've already started,
So you
whatever.
were talking about public hearings prior to.
A public hearing is, I'll tell you from being a city manager, the city council votes on the budget, the people don't. They elect the council sets the budget. But they still have to have public hearings. So in the fact of the public hearings, you can broadcast the stuff through your television network. You can hold public hearings where certain groups of people can come. There's many ways to do that to help educate the people who usually show up and are trying to figure it out the day of the election. So you provide the information out, and that's what this PowerPoint does. And that's why when you use that, your town meetings drop down to 30 minutes because people have all their information in advance. And it's a powerful tool. It works. And in this particular case, this is the biggest tax increase. Like I said, that's the only two things that shocked me taking the job here. Nobody told me that.
We need to take care of that. All in favor then of the third option? Okay.
And not with pleasure.
It gives the people they can do an absentee ballot, which is good.
Well, and my recommendation would be for us to have a couple open session public hearings so that if people have questions on the way that we voted that.
With the information we put out there and like have one time set up where the superintendent's available and the people can log in and ask questions.
Yep.
And that's why the meeting on Friday will also be very beneficial to that aspect.
And, you know, you can use the auditorium where if you're going to schedule a bunch of public hearings, you probably could have 2 or 3 of them. So you're never going to violate in that. And we can have handouts. I mean, this is a sell thing. I mean,
You got to sell it, and ultimately, Limestone has always been that town meeting is the voice of the people, and the voice of the people is the final voice on the direction we take.
and they're getting the final voice in the fact that they've given their issues.
All right, so we got that one for the 14th. So what do we want to call the 15th then? Since the election.
It's already done, yeah, 15th.
8.
That'd be a Wednesday. That's not our regular meeting first. No, wouldn't be.
Somewhere on the 15th, you're gonna have to release what the tallies of these
Yeah,
votes
right.
were.
That's what I'm saying, so.
Result day.
Informational day.
I would call it a special town meeting if MMA allows it. If not, then we have to follow MMA's direction.
Yeah,
Because
but even a special town meeting, you may draw more people in on a special town meeting.
That's what I'm saying.
With everything that's going, now it'd be just like having a town meeting, we still have limitations.
But we may be down to only one or two items.
Yeah, but I'm talking
But
about.
you may have over
Not to follow the
150
same,
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the state has come out and said the school only has to vote on the bottom line. We could do the same thing, but I'm certainly not going to recommend it.
Right.
I think what we ought to do, I don't think we can. I don't know. I'm just really concerned that the following day, because of the information, if they are knocking stuff down, that you'll have a large number of people show up, even those that may not have voted. We've seen that with town meetings.
So
We still do Zoom, right? I mean,
Well, that's what I'm wondering if we do.
We can
but
send
wouldn't be
flyers
the
out.
next day because we wouldn't have everything available to let them know that.
So why would we schedule a selectmen's meeting if we need to take action to set a special town meeting? Because there's no reason we don't need to do it that next day. We
Well, that's
can
what I'm
allow a 7-day cool down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying I
Yeah.
don't think we need to do it the next day because it's not gonna work.
Right.
Between now and the next few days, I'll find out what the requirements are to be.
if it don't, the school don't go through.
I think if we do it the following Wednesday, if
A
we just
regular
kind of
meeting.
casually set that up as a date that we're gonna meet regardless.
Yep.
And if it gives us time to publicize it if we need to, whatever we need to do, we can have it ready then. And we'll be legal, so.
Okay. I agree with that.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Say there's a warrant that was voted down. Say they did vote down the fire department, we're bringing the fire department back into it. And we know we can't live without a fire department. And we have a special town meeting in the auditorium, and how many people show up? Are we
So
outside?
that's what we're saying. We can do it by Zoom and so forth.
But you're limiting the people that can participate. All your elderly, or a majority of them, don't do Zoom. They do face-to-face one. So you're taking that whole population out. That's not gonna have a voice. That's what you're telling me.
I think it's the circumstance that makes it difficult, Fred, that's
No,
all.
because we could still have our meeting here, but restrict it to those that don't have the services available.
Okay,
You can do 50 in the auditorium.
Yeah.
And then
and then still over here.
and then work with people. You know, my wife could do a Zoom meeting from home because she has the technology to be able to do it. And at the door, if you're at your 50, you say, hey, geez, who has the ability to go home and Zoom in on this meeting?
Well,
So that we
I
can,
think that needs to be it right out in front though,
Right.
so that they know.
Okay.
But if we do it, that's an easy way because especially those that are not in favor of it or whatever, they're the ones that are gonna want to voice their concerns. And then you're gonna have the other group that says, well, why did they shoot this down? So that's what I'm saying. I am expecting, if anything doesn't pass, we're gonna have a large crowd at the next thing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying, if we do it a week later, we get plenty of notice out, let people know that we're gonna be discussing this. And we can have it set up in the auditorium, or wherever we need to do. I mean, for that matter, we can set up chairs in the gymnasium, so we can have another 50 in there, because you ain't gonna get them in here. So we can meet the criteria and just put a microphone in each place and a video, where they can see what's going on. I think that's the only reasonable way we can do it all.
make it work.
But at least with the referendum, like the option 3, at least it'll start the process where we get an opinion of everybody. That's my feeling. So we'll set it up for the following week. You're still all agreeable with that? Okay. So that'll be the Actually, it'll be the 22nd, because we'll do it on a Wednesday. That gives us the 7 days in between. So, okay. All right, next item then, elected officials.
Sorry, no bailing.
Anything?
The only thing I asked is the Morris Road, when we're gonna do the shoulders, a couple people up there said that the road's breaking up from the tractors. That the corners are starting to break off because there's no shoulder there.
Which one's that?
Morris Road that we did last fall, right?
MORIS.
MORIS, yep. And that was brought up a couple times, so I figured I'd ask and see what our answer was to return to asking you, I guess, yeah.
We need to ask Jimmy what's going on.
Right, and
Just
just,
got a plan for all the roads, so.
Oh, okay, you
Just find out where it is.
not tonight, no, just for you to relay it.
Yeah,
That's-
no. We haven't had a chance to do roads yet.
Okay, well, this one here, they say it's breaking up on the corner, so we spent quite a bit of money,
We just
so I
had
have,
it done, so.
Where's it
just done last fall, up towards the border on the
Something
left.
near my place.
Okay.
Yeah, just up the road from Walton.
I'll go on it tomorrow and take a look at it.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's all I
anything
have.
else?
That's all I have.
Thank the highway department for painting the lines and stuff. Kind of looks-
Looks good. Tom.
Today they were working pretty good, it's
Yep.
pretty warm out.
Chris, anything?
I took a walk down to the park tonight. There's quite a bit of trash that probably should be picked up. And around the bottom of a lot of the playground equipment, we've got grass growing up through the sand and stuff, so.
We got some landscaping. You're talking where the pavilion is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got some landscaping to do down there. And
There's some baseball equipment that's out. So,
Why that? I should put it away. Anything else up? Okay. Anything under other? Okay, approve warrants 77, 80, and 81.
So moved.
Move to second. Any discussion?
One discussion, I don't see the firemen on here.
That'd be a payroll warrant.
Right.
there's one more payroll warrant.
Hey, right.
Is there?
What's not on there?
Are the firemen, was that warrant supposed to be this week? Am I wrong? Usually it's the second time of the month.
Well, there's 3 payrolls this month.
Okay, so
It's probably in the, I'll check on it tomorrow.
when do you get paid, Chris? Right now, or is it toward the end of the month, the firemen?
It varies.
I don't know the answer.
Oh, but is it
Like
usually
in
the second
December, like in
week?
December, it's the first payroll in December,
Right,
because they treat the fire, they let the firefighters get the checks early to go
for
Christmas shopping.
Christmas, sure.
And then the other times, it's usually the middle of the month, but because this month had 3 Tuesdays, somebody
No.
sends you back to option.
It's,
Usually I always get it just now, just, I don't know.
I don't think anybody's, usually the fire chief somewhere will come in and with a list of who's getting paid.
I think that was already done on Tuesday.
Okay,
That was what I was mentioning.
I'll take care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? I had a couple questions, but I don't know if you can answer them. One of them was where library materials was charged for the Prime Monthly EBK Honeywell.
What?
That's what it's noted as, and I'm going, what is this? It sounds to me like it's something to do with the alarm system. Comes down to materials, I couldn't understand.
Lucian did the alarm.
Well,
Probably Lucian did the alarm system. Honeywell would be heat, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, motion sensors or
But
something.
they have a control panel for Honeywell, so that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So I'm just questioning why it's under materials when, instead of.
Maintenance, yeah.
And then, under admin building maintenance, it says paper towels, 42x4 soap. And going, okay. Again, it's just a question. I wasn't complaining, I just didn't understand it
well,
was there.
there's,
And your expense for the bunker in,
I might put, yeah.
okay, it should have been 1,000, right?
Yeah, I did notice that.
They didn't take,
It's 1,000.
okay, I'll pay the difference on it. It's, I just told them that bought the bill. They sent the bill in.
Yeah,
I'll make the adjustment on my
And they
paper.
asked me where it was to come from, and I said, $1,000 is your travel expense.
The bill probably came direct into them. Because
So I just saw the
it's,
extra on
it went through, they probably put it through June 30th and that was it, or something.
That's
I'll
the
take
one
care of
I had. So, got a motion second, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, David?
How you shut this? To adjourn?
How do we shut off?
You don't need executive session. Okay.
Oh, I would
To adjourn?
if you wanted to.
No, oh, no, I'm good.
No, you're locked up.
No, my supper's waiting. We're good.
Okay.
You're doing a great job.
We shut off yet?
Not yet.
It's still on.
Some. Oh. Okay, first, let me see something.
Just saying.
Yeah, don't say.
In all seriousness, they're unhappy with me being here.
I can.
It's okay. So I don't
Thank goodness.
but, oh, no, yeah. I had Lynch signs hanging. Oh, yeah.
People like him, and I just not
They're not going to be. I get to hear.
Saying hi to your sweetheart, is that it? Yeah.
I know that nobody knows